Well, good morning, everyone. I'm showing 10 o'clock, so the second meeting of the Rural Veterinary Incentive Program Committee is called to order. The time is 10 a.m. I'm going to do something like we did our commission meeting, so would you join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll now do the roll call. I'm Andy Schwartz, Ms. Brittany Sharkey, Dr. Guy Lonergan, Dr. John August, here. Dr. Stephen Gola, here. Dr. John Clater, here. Dr. Courtney Pace, here. Dr. Charles Graham, not present. Dr. Allie Broyles, present. The quorum is present. For the record, there are 8 of the 9 members attending. So just before we get into the business, so some other folks in the room. So Dr. Lackey, you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning. I'm Angela Lackey. I'm the Assistant Executive Director. One of the reasons I'm here, I help administer the VMLL, so the USDA's veterinary loan repayment program. I'd be a subject matter expert for that in case there are just any questions.
Thank you. Yes, please.
I'm Chief of Staff at the Texas Animal Health Commission. I work with the Budget Department and with the rule process, so in here as well.
Okay. Trent?
Trent Hightower, General Counsel for TVMA.
Thank you. And we have Loris, she's a legal assistant, and Amanda's back here with the recording, so.
And then either side of you.
Oh. Pardon me?
And I'm Janine Coggeshall, I'm the General Counsel.
I'm Jabbar Fahim, attorney for the Animal Health Commission.
So we had some new faces since the last meeting, but rolling here. So going on to item number 3. So the first item of business on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the May 17th, 2022 RVIP meeting. And those are in your book, I believe, on the second tab. Hopefully you had a chance to look at those. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No. Motion carries. Minutes are adopted. The next item of business on the agenda is the Rural Veterinary Incentive Program Administration and Activity of the Higher Education Coordinating Board, the Texas Animal Health Commission, and universities. So turn it over to Ms. Coggeshall.
Jabbar, could you do the next slide? Okay, so I just want to do a quick overview. I know a large portion of last meeting was discussed about the history of the program and sort of where we're at. This is going to be a quick summary of that overview, so we're kind of all back in the mindset of what we need to do as the committee's role in this. So here's a breakdown of the general players in the Rural Veterinarian Incentive Program. So we have the Animal Health Commission, which will be responsible for administrating the program. The RVIP Committee is going to create the rules to assist in the administration and also be responsible for the selection of the participants. The Higher Education Coordinating Board is the agency that administers the RVIP account. They will ultimately be the ones to distribute the funds and in compliance with the RVIP selection and work with the university systems to the extent needed for that. And then we've got the university systems themselves, which under the current statute are responsible for creating the agreement with the participant and entering the promissory note with the participant. We do the next slide. Next slide, yeah.
After that.
Okay, and so I just want to go over quickly actually, can you call the next item? Sorry. We'll go down the list in order.
Sure. The next item of business on the agenda is the state and federal statutes, rules, and regulations related to the program and its funding, including Texas Education Code, Chapters 56 and 61, Texas Senate Bill 8, 87th session, the 3D call session of 2021, American Rescue Plan Act, the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds, and 42 U.S. 802, 803, 31, Chapter 31 of the CFR, Part 35. So, Ms. Coggeshall, that was a mouthful.
Despite the preamble for that, this should also be very quick. Just as a refresher, so our enabling statutes are in the Texas Education Code. I've included those in your book so you can actually see the verbiage in those statutes. Now, just in general, for those of you not involved in government work or state government work, the enabling statute is what gives us the authority to act. So we can't perform any actions unless the legislature tells us it's okay. So whatever's in the statute is the limit of our authority to act. So in the statute, the RVIP committee has the authority to create rules governing the eligibility for participants and also evaluating the criteria necessary for selecting the participants. That statute also grants the Animal Health Commission authority to administer the program and administer the program in accordance with the rules adopted by the committee. And then the second statute, the 61.9965, is the statute that grants the Higher Education Coordinating Board authority to administer the account. Now, what's important is the enabling statutes don't necessarily fund the program. So we have a separate legislative action that will actually give us money to distribute. And right now, we currently have a source of funding that was provided during the last legislative session under SB 8. So this was the distribution of the ARPA funds, essentially, and specifically the state and local fiscal recovery funds. So in all, Texas got around $15 billion, and a portion of that the legislature decided to provide to this program. So through Senate Bill 8, we received $1 million into the program. Now that $1 million ultimately came from the federal program, so we've got these two layers of restrictions to the funds. One's the federal restrictions, and the other is the state restrictions provided by SB 8. So here are some of the limitations with this particular source of funding. So under state law, the funds must be used by November 7th, 2023. And under federal law, all ARPA funds under the State Local Fiscal Recovery Fund program must be used for costs incurred on or after March 3rd, 2021. Further funds must be obligated by December 31st, 2024, and expended by December 31st, 2026. And this is referred to in the statute as a period of performance. So the main deadline we need to look at in terms of distributing the $1 million right now is going to be under state law, this November 7th, 2023 deadline. Another one of the limits of these funds is we do have additional reporting requirements because these are federal funds. Luckily, because of the way it has been structured and distributed throughout different Texas agencies, the reporting has actually been really streamlined. So because the Higher Education Coordinating Board is holding these funds in their account, they are going to be primarily responsible for all the reporting. So the Higher Education Board currently, even though we haven't expended any funds yet, and will continue into the future, they report their expenditures to the governor's office. The governor's office then prepares the total report for the expenditures of these funds to the entire state of Texas and presents that to the federal government. Essentially, that means once we tell the Texas Higher Education and Coordinating Board of our participants and the amount that will be distributed to that person, that takes care of our reporting requirements. And Texas Higher Education and Coordinating Board will prepare the report and transmit it to the governor's office, which I think at the last meeting there was a little bit of concern about, what's required in our reporting. Luckily, it's very minimal. Additional thing that I want to keep in everybody's mind is when we distribute money to a participant, the Higher Education Coordinating Board is required to report that to the IRS, and it's going to be reported as income. We have no ability or authority to advise a participant about the tax consequences of their distribution of the fund. That is something they're going to have to consult with an expert themselves about how it might impact them. As we know, the tax code can be incredibly complex. There's going to be some exceptions that exist, but those exceptions could be taken away. I just want the committee to be mindful that we still have to report it. Okay, now this is the more significant and more interesting part of what's been going on right now.
Introduce this.
Yes, please introduce the next one.
We're going to hit pause for a second and see if there's any discussion over what we've covered so far.
And maybe this will come up later as part of the discussion, but the Enabling Act talks about being able to identify a student enrolled in a university, and that funds could be distributed as a grant or scholarship direct to the student. Are they then, is a scholarship subject to IRS reporting?
So I don't know the quick answer to that. What we'd have to do, depending on how it has been tagged or distributed, so one of the limitations of the statute itself is that the payments are to be made to offset a loan that the student took out. So one of the requirements is that the student take out a loan. So this is still going to always be loan repayment assistance. So I don't know if we can technically classify it as a scholarship in the general sense where it comes from a scholarship fund at the institution. That might be one of the limits of the statute.
Well, we'll get into the statute.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The wording that was used, must be used by November 7, 2023, must be committed by, is that what we're saying?
Must be expended, really.
Expended.
Yeah, so we must, so the way SB 8 works, if we do not use the funds, that money by that time, it will be returned to the state.
Do we, in that sense, can we encumber the funds against and expend them in a future period of time?
Well, so the problem if we have it as a conditional loan is if they default on the loan and have to then repay, we haven't really used those funds. So, but if you call the next item, we might be able to address some of these things. Oh.
We really don't have $1 million with $900,000, right? Because there's a 10%. Mm-hmm.
So there is a 10% administration fee. However, both the Higher Education Coordinating Board can waive that fee, and so can we. And I think the option the election at this time by the Higher Education Coordinating Board is to waive that fee, and our agency is leaning on the side of waiving that fee so we can distribute.
That would be the most. You could charge 2% if you needed to.
Yeah, 7% for the Animal Health Commission and 3% for the Higher Education Coordinating Board.
So as Janine said, I'm leaning in the direction of not, claiming any of that. I don't want to make that decision forever, but currently we're in good shape with budget-wise, so we wouldn't need to try to claim any of that funding at present. So.
Right, and so that's ultimately a decision that the commission will make, but that will sort of depend how much is ultimately available for distribution.
Not, we'll move on to agenda item 6. The next item of business is on the agenda is the proposed legislation for the 88th legislature regular session that relates to the program.
Okay, so this is where things might change. So currently, Representative Drew Darby, who was instrumental in transferring the authority or passing the House bill last time that moved the RVIP to the Animal Health Commission and set up this new administration, has actually filed a bill on February 8, 2023 to make some key changes to the language. Essentially what his proposed changes would do would increase the applicant pool. It would allow the committee to consider not only graduates from Tech and A&M, but also any vet school graduates that want to come work in Texas. So it would expand our applicant pool, and critically for, I think, the purposes of the administration, it would streamline the administration of the distribution of the loan repayment assistance. it would cut out the universities as being required to hold the note. The Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board would handle all of the financial documents with the participant. They're well-suited to do that. They do this in other programs. That is a large portion of their agency's mission and charge is to do these loan repayment assistance. So that would definitely streamline the program. If the law passes, it could take immediate effect if we get 2/3 vote in both houses. That doesn't typically happen very frequently, so otherwise it's going to go into effect September 1st of 2023. So if that happens, we would then shift the universities from being the administrator and the loan holders to the Higher Education Coordinating Board. One other thing that, next slide. Another thing that is in discussions with the legislature is possible budget riders. Okay, so what is a budget rider? A budget rider are enumerated policy directives, contingent appropriations that follow traditional line items in the General Appropriation Act. So like we talked about before, we can't act unless the legislature gives us authority to act. We also can't spend money unless the legislature gives us authority to spend that money. So each session, the legislature passes a General Appropriations Act, which basically goes line by line and tells state agencies how they can spend the money. The Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board has requested a specific rider to allow the SB 8 funds to be extended into 2024 and 2025. So that November 7th, 2023 expiration date might be extended if the legislature passes this rider. If that's the case, we get a lot more flexibility in spending that initial funding into 2024 and into 2025. That's a possibility. It's not a guarantee, but we're going to be monitoring that. And for those of you who would like to monitor it separately, for this legislative session, the General Appropriations Act is going to be billed under House Bill 1. Each year, each session, the Senate and the House switch over who will be publishing the General Appropriations Act, and this year, the House Bill 1 is going to ultimately be the General Appropriations Act. Okay.
So that, the bill that Janine was just discussing by Darby it's House Bill 2026, and we've got it in the book. It's about halfway through under one of these tabs, if you want.
And for clarification, that just extends a date, that does not ask for more funds.
Yes, correct. And there is discussion in the legislature about appropriating additional funds into this program to take us past this initial funding. Again, that all just depends on legislation and what the legislature ultimately decides to do. If they do appropriate additional funds just from the general budget, we won't have the same limitations that we have with the federal spending. And then we'll have whatever limitations the legislature decides to set on the individual appropriations.
So can we talk, wasn't there another bill that would call for more money, more funds to be?
Nothing has been filed yet.
Nothing filed.
But there has been discussions in the legislature about providing additional funding for this program.
Any other discussion on that topic?
So can I ask a question again about the disbursement? So on the section 56-102, B, it talks about the financial support of the eligible participant may be used to retire, utilization, aid tuition fees, and university books.
Yeah.
That's not so much retiring debt, that's once they've incurred 50% of 1 year.
So one of the eligibility requirements in the statute is that the participant have at least 50% of their tuition and fees covered by a student loan.
For 1 year.
For 1 year. So I guess it is, in theory, we could actually award a repayment and then scholarship for the remaining years. Yeah, that would be permitted by the statute.
Okay. Because then that would affect future discussions discussion of today on rulemaking on disbursement of said funds.
Yes, correct. And when we get into the draft discussions, we did try to craft them both for the funds that we have now and also the potential for future appropriated funds so that could carry us through administrating this program in the long term.
Other discussion? Seeing none, so we'll move on to agenda item 7, administrative rulemaking process and requirements. Mr. Fahim.
This is going to be a quick little education session. So the authority that is provided to this committee to make the rules is found in Texas Education Code 56103D and E. And I just put the language here. These are the rules that are required of the committee to adopt, and this is from the statute. So when we were drafting the rules, and I believe the previous draft of those rules also included this consideration. One thing I wanted to note in E is that last clause says the committee shall consider any applicable regulations adopted under 7 U.S.C. Section 3161A and previous work of the Texas Animal Health Commission. That statute, the federal statute, deals with the VMLRP. So the statute specifically says that we can take into account what has been drafted for the VMLRP, and in the materials you have here, there are examples of some of the applications, and so some of the work will be taken from that, and so hopefully when we are coming back to adopt these rules that we're hopefully going to pass today, we will also have the rubric, the application, any disclosure forms, samples of that for approval as well. The timeline, briefly, the committee is going to agree on proposed rules to submit for public comment. Hopefully that will happen today. These proposed rules are published in the Texas Register for a 30-day comment period. And after that period has ended, we would have a follow-up meeting to formally adopt the rules, and then we would publish the adopted rules in the Texas Register, and they would go into effect 20 days after the notice is filed with the Secretary of State. So this is the Texas Register publication schedule. The important date that we have to kind of look out for is this coming Monday. So ideally, we would, the committee would vote to adopt or propose these rules. We would publish by noon on Monday for publication in the Texas Register on March 10th, 2023. That's just their schedule. So then the comment period would begin on March 10th, run for 30 days, which puts us at April 10th. I didn't have a nice highlight on this one, but that is the end of that comment period. So I think even if we were to meet on that day, I don't know if we would have the ability to submit those rules by the noon deadline. But if that were to happen, then they would.
There's no deadline on that part.
Yeah, that's
by close of business.
Oh, okay. So then,
On that day.
so then the committee would have to come back and meet, and so the scheduling of the second meeting is going to play into when we would publish, and whenever those do get published, they would go into effect.
So in theory, if at our next meeting, if the rules are adopted, then we send notice to the Secretary of State, and then 20 days after that notice has been sent, the rules go into effect. So with that timeline, we're thinking about being able to accept applications in May.
So HB1, in May, the conference committee will be doing their work, and then the end of May, and then the governor has in June would probably sign that, right?
Right, and so there will be we'll have a little bit more certainty about, do we get to extend the use of these funds? Is there going to be a statutory change to our enabling statute around that same time too? Because legislative session runs through the summer. And so at that point, we will have a lot more clarity on those. The rules that we are proposing for the committee's consideration added a lot of flexibility. So if there is some statutory language change, we don't need to re-adopt different rules for that, and also add some flexibility of determining the recipients based on the particular funding amount or funding source. So that way, if we are able to still use the ARPA funds through 2024, something like that, we can still use the restrictions of the ARPA funds. But if we have new money appropriated, we can then have some flexibility about how we distribute that money, which I guess is a great segue to the next item on the agenda, unless there's any more questions.
Seeing none, so the next item on the agenda is consideration of and possible action on proposed rules. And this will be presented by both Ms. Carter-Shaw and Mr. Green.
Okay, so this is the bulk of the meeting today. So this is kind of the nitty-gritty to make sure we have a set of rules that we feel comfortable publishing in the Texas Registrar for public comment.
And those are on the last tab in your notes.
Yeah. As Jabbar mentioned before, if the committee moves to propose these rules, they will be published and open for public comment for 30 days. And then we'll have a chance to reconvene, discuss the public comments, and make decisions about whether or not we want to modify any of these rules based on public comment. And then at the next meeting, depending on the decision of the committee, we can adopt the rules and have them take effect within 20 days. So here's the quick overview of the rules. The committee viewed a version of these rules at the last time. We have since redrafted the rules to address some of the unknowns. You know, will the statutory language change? Will the source of funding change? To add some flexibility that still meets our goal of accomplishing the committee's authorization to create rules, and also doesn't conflict with the enabling statutes or any of the other statutes. I believe they're a little more streamlined from what you viewed last time. We also took in consideration a lot of the discussion that happened at the last meeting regarding some of the eligibility criteria. But there's going to be a couple sections of this that will probably require a significant discussion by the committee, especially in terms of evaluation and selection process. So that's 42.13. But to ensure that we have all the language the way the committee wants it, it's going to be a little tedious, but we're going to read through each rule and then discuss the rule after it's read, if there's any changes that need to be made or any suggestions. So, Jabbar, do you want to start off with the first rule?
Hopefully this is an easy one. The authority and purpose. Authority for this chapter is provided in the Texas Education Code, Chapter 56, Subchapter G, Rural Veterinarian Incentive Program. These rules establish procedures to administer the subchapter as prescribed in the Texas Education Code, Sections 56.101 through 56.106. The purpose, subsection B, the purpose of the Rural Veterinarian Incentive Program, is to encourage veterinary students and recent graduates to practice veterinary medicine in rural counties in Texas by providing educational loan repayment assistance.
Any modifications or changes to that rule?
I don't mean to jump back to this again, but if the Act talks about being able to use it for tuition and fees, that is not loan repayment, per se.
So let's consider changing that then.
Could we just change it by amended by saying repayment or reimbursement assistance? Would that? Or does that not?
Payment for payment of
We could add, by providing educational loan repayment assistance or payment of tuition and fees.
That sounds fair.
again, I don't mean to.
No, it's also important that we get it right. I'm going to reread that section. So, subsection B, purpose. The purpose of the Rural Veterinary Incentive Program, parentheses program, is to encourage veterinary students and recent graduates to practice veterinary medicine in rural counties in Texas by providing educational loan repayment assistance or payment of tuition and fees.
Agreed.
Okay. I'll let you read this one.
Okay.
This is when we start to get into sort of the rules and the role that the Animal Health Commission will play. So this is a lot of discretion within the committee to adjust this.
Administration of the program. Under Texas Education Code, Subchapter G, Section 56.102, the Texas Animal Health Commission, parentheses commission, shall administer the Rural Veterinary Incentive Program in accordance with rules adopted by the Rural Veterinarian Incentive Program Committee, parentheses the committee, under this chapter. Subsection 1, administration of the program for participants without a rural community sponsor. For each year that funding for the program is available for distribution to participants without a rural community sponsor, the Commission shall A, create an application that requires an applicant to provide information on eligibility and the evaluation criteria established by the rules in this chapter and applicable law. Disseminate, subsection B, disseminate information about the program in accordance with section 42.7 of this chapter. C, set a deadline to submit the application. D, create instructions on how to complete and submit the application. E, select the method of submission for the application. F, create a scoring rubric for the application that includes standardized scoring for each evaluation criteria. G, notify applicants who are selected to be participants under the program. H, facilitate all required steps for a participant to receive loan repayment assistance under the program. And I, complete any reporting as required by law. I figure I'd stop there so we can kind of make that. The first one is administration of the program for participants without a rural community sponsor, and subsection 2 is administration for participants with a rural community sponsor.
Sorry. What's the definition of a rural community sponsor again?
So it's either going to be a local government or a nonprofit within that county who's able to raise funds in order to distribute it for this purpose. So we do have, later on in the rules, we do have that defined a little bit better than it is in the statute, but it is largely statutory in nature. The enabling statute itself provides for rural community sponsors. And I think what the intent behind that part of the statute is to allow for a community or a rural county who has identified a need in their county for a veterinarian to be able to raise funds and use this program as a way to ensure that they've got a vet that will commit to practice in their community.
So this program is reimbursing them?
The community sponsor would essentially pay into the program for their funds to be distributed to the students.
That specific person?
Correct. At this point, we haven't had anybody approach us wanting to be a rural community sponsor. So I think that's not going to be the majority of the funds to distribute by the committee. That's really just another option if a community wanted to participate.
We talked last time about why would a community do that? Why not go directly to the veterinarian or something? I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know the answer either.
Is there a possibility that would have a matching fund, that the community would do half, and then this committee would allocate other half? Do these rules allow for that?
The rules in the statute, or the rules in the current legislation do not allow for that. So it's sort of a separate pot of money. If it's a participant under the rule sponsorship, it needs to be completely funded by the rule sponsor.
Unfortunate.
So just, go ahead.
It could be an amount too. If I was going to privately sponsor, for tax reasons, you can only give so much. So maybe this is a way you can, I don't know, contribute more than a gift amount. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That may be incentive. But I wish there was a way that the committee could decide whether or not they wanted to match or give more or whatever.
Yeah, currently the legislation won't allow you to do that. But there's always a possibility the legislation will change.
What would prevent us from giving one student a pot of money from both? What if they applied for both routes?
If they qualified under the general fund, I think that would be permitted. There is a little bit of restriction that eligibility is dependent about whether or not they've committed to another scholarship program that offers repayment assistance. So whether or not we consider this program sort of a disqualifying factor if they've already qualified under one and not the other. The other element of the statute for the community sponsor is the community sponsor is supposed to commit to 100% tuition and fees. So if the community sponsor makes that commitment, there really isn't going to be a whole lot to fill in.
Thank you.
So back to this subsection of the administration. So one thing did stand out to me sort of related to our last comment. So under H, we have facilitate all required steps for the participant to receive loan repayment assistance under the program. So loan repayment assistance or payment of tuition and fees.
I think we should just have it understood that everywhere you have loan repayment, we need to add those words.
Okay.
Just want to call attention to subsection F there, create a scoring rubric so this is putting all of this responsibility on the commission. So I hope we can get some feedback from this committee on what we should weight and how we should score those, right?
Yeah, it doesn't prevent the commission from receiving feedback from the committee, but it ultimately puts the final decision about what that application and rubric would look like on the committee, on the commission. The main reason the rule is drafted this way to grant that administration authority to the commission is to prevent the need for future meetings just for getting an application out there.
So who ultimately selects the folks, the rubric or this committee?
The committee, but it will be based on, so later on in the rules, we have sort of a scoring ranking system in case we have more applicants than we have money to go around. They would be ranked off of the scoring rubric. And the rubric would be based on evaluation criteria.
And who establishes the numbers for the rubric system? Is it the committee or employees of the commission?
Employees of the commission. The criteria would be established by the committee, and then the rubric to develop a standardized scoring system would be the commission.
That's what I would like help with. You have some input.
I thought the intention was for this committee to select who gets the money.
And that, yes, and that is 100%.
That's what I was asking. Who's going to actually do the scoring of the applicant?
The committee will always be the one scoring the applicants.
Sure.
So if there is let's say we have a rubric where we, and this is just hypothetical, there's nothing on paper yet, but we have a rubric where a applicant can be scored 1 through 5 based on their level of experience in a rural community. It would be a committee member that does the scoring of giving them a 5 versus a 1.
Sure. Thank you.
And maybe this is jumping ahead, but when the rubric, there are some items that may not apply to a person.
Correct.
Right, so they wouldn't get a 0 out of, so the total score would have to always include a denominator that excludes the ones that don't.
Correct. And one of the areas that we can look to for sort of the scoring rubric is the federal program, and there's also other scholarship funds that sort of follow similar rubrics. The key is to try to get something standardized where we can actually then evaluate an individual's application.
I just don't want it to mimic the federal program.
Correct, yeah. It's a guide only.
And the items that will be in the rubric are based on what's further down on the evaluation criteria. So
yes.
As we move through this, the evaluation criteria will be the opportunity to define what goes in, what are the items in the rubric. I think, Stephen.
Makes sense.
Yes, and that's the intent, that whatever ends up being a formal evaluation criteria would be a decision made by the committee. So the commission would not have any discretion in deciding those evaluation criteria, just ensuring that the applicant provide information so that the committee could evaluate that criteria. Okay, so we are going to make the one change to subsection H. So once that changes in H, it will say, facilitate all required steps for a participant to receive loan repayment assistance or payment of tuition and fees under the program. Was there any other changes that you want to make at this time to this section of the administration?
In that this is the first year we're creating this committee would have the opportunity to reevaluate the set rubric in coming years?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll move on to subsection 2, administration of the program for participants with a rural community sponsor. For each instance when a rural community sponsor requests to participate in the program, the Commission shall, A, collect information from the rural community sponsor to determine the sponsor's eligibility by the rules in this chapter or applicable law. B, determine if the rural community sponsor is eligible to participate under the program. C, collect information from the rural community sponsor's selected participant to determine the participant's eligibility by the rules in this chapter and applicable law. And D, determine if the rural community sponsor's selected participant is eligible to participate under the program.
How are potential rural community sponsors made aware of this program?
So one of the items that the commission would be tasked with is issuing publications and press releases about the program. We would be hopeful that they would learn through word of mouth or other industry leaders about the possibility that they could participate in the program. And depending on the level of interest that we receive from any rural community sponsors, we could also reevaluate. If we get overwhelming response, the committee could also reevaluate this process. Okay, no changes to that one.
So in this, we would, under D, the commission would determine if they're eligible. So isn't that passing judgment on,
So the eligibility is going to be by the statute. So we're not using any discretion. We're just ensuring that they actually are statutorily allowed to participate in this program.
So if they've been out 5 years, they're not eligible.
That's correct.
Thank you.
All right. Subsection B, administration of the account under Texas Education Code, Chapter 61, Subchapter 00, Section 61.9965, the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, parentheses board, administers the Rural Veterinary Incentive Program account, parentheses account. It didn't make it.
Oh, we didn't make it, sorry. And that's just a restatement of the statute.
The bill passes, then the account's managed by the coordinating board?
This statute will not change. There is no, at present, there's no bill to modify this statute. So the part of the bill is under Chapter 56 of the Education Code will basically, it changes the language from the university system shall enter an agreement to the higher education coordinating board shall enter an agreement. Okay, any comments, any more comments of that rule? Okay, we can move on to the next rule. And this will be the definitions section, but we'll go through one by, we'll do it a few at a time, I guess, and move forward from there.
The following words and terms, when used in this chapter, have the following meanings unless the context clearly indicates otherwise. 1, account. The Rural Veterinarian Incentive Program account authorized under Texas Education Code, Chapter 61, Subchapter 00, Section 61.9965. Applicant, a person applying to the Rural Veterinarian Incentive Program. Application round, means the period beginning on the date the Commission begins accepting applications and continuing until all participants are selected from the application. Board, Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. Commission, the Texas Animal Health Commission or its designee. 6, committee, the Rural Veterinarian Incentive Program Committee established by Texas Education Code, Chapter 56, Subchapter G. Eligible education loan, a qualifying loan under this program as prescribed by Section 42.19 of this chapter. 8, full-time veterinary medical services, an average of at least 32 hours of veterinary care per week during the obligated service period.
Okay, let's stop there, because I think number 8 might be something you guys want to discuss. That was a number I chose based on general, or I drafted based on general, this is the typical amount that people consider a full-time job. It's an average of 32 or more hours per week. But that number can change based on the committee's requirements, what they would consider full-time veterinary medical services.
I mean,
Don't look at me.
That's what we use for legal interpretation for benefits.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's a number that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, because if you think about it, there's going to be some weeks people take vacation, there's some weeks that they're sick. So the expectation of 40 hours of pure service per week is high, so that's why we do 32.
The first meeting, it was discussed quite a higher number of hours than that by one of the members of this.
When you use the word average.
Average, yeah.
I wouldn't qualify for the new one, so.
I know Dr. Trial would like you to.
That's his problem, not mine.
Is it full-time service in an eligible county, or is it full-time veterinary service and practice that supports that rural county?
It's going to be the services need to be provided in the particular county. I think there's some flexibility, so if somebody has a practice that serves multiple rural counties, that time that they spent in those other rural counties can count to this 32 average weekly hours of full-time service.
Yeah, and there's no way for me to figure that out.
So, Courtney's practice is on the southeast corner of Lubbock County, but they serve Gaza and all the counties around.
Garza, King.
Okay, so maybe, I mean, the intention is that they all, the actual practice, caring for patients, caring for doing the items that would be considered veterinary medical practice would take place in that rural county.
For them hauling to Courtney.
So Courtney may not be, somebody like Courtney may not be able to apply. So if you're doing 50% of your work in a non-rural county, a county with population is over 100,000, then that wouldn't necessarily qualify as full-time service. Now, if there's additional requirements you want to put on this definition, because we do use this term, full-time veterinary medical services, throughout to determine somebody's eligibility. We can also put a pin in this and come back to it after we review other rules.
Where did the 50% in the rural county come from? Is that?
No, the 50% is not there. One of the eligibility requirements is that they practice full-time in a rural county. I think there's some flexibility of rural counties, but there's no flexibility of combining rural county with non-rural counties.
So you were saying that you can't separate it out. You don't know how much time you spent in
There
it.
would be no way, for me particularly. Now, someone that does mobile veterinary practice, they could probably, if they tried, they could probably sit down and figure that out, but it would be tough
By
for
the
me.
address of the client or something, or is it?
Yeah, but did they bring it in? I mean, you know, I recently, on Monday, just had a really big case from Garza County, but they brought it to the clinic. So
Yeah,
that
penalizes the haul-in clinics that built the facility to service those counties.
right. So it's just, and I think we touched on this last time, it's going to exclude anybody that's a rural practitioner in a county of more than 100,000 people, really, until you get to the state. This is just the ARP funding, right?
Right.
And so until we get some other funding,
Well,
it's going to exclude that, right?
No. The statute itself, no matter what our source of funding is, limits recipients to those who practice in a rural community. And the statute itself defines rural county. A rural county is defined as a county whose population is 100,000 or less. So in Texas, that's about 200 counties. 200 counties are 100,000 or less. So it's still a large portion of the state, but it really is there to try to encourage people to move to those counties and practice in those counties. So
I just thought there was some way, last time when we met, I thought there was a way that after this $1 million was done, there was a way that you could circumvent that. But maybe not.
Well, so I think, I know last time there was a large discussion about whether or not a person was a beneficiary versus a recipient. That doesn't really affect whether or not we can distribute these federal funds. The federal funds absolutely can be distributed under federal law and under the state law. So we don't need to look at where somebody is a particular resident of a county. That's not important. It's really where they practice. And that all comes down to the enabling statute for this program.
So wouldn't this committee be able to discern, based upon the circumstances of the applicant at the location they would be working at, whether or not they would qualify?
Yes.
So we would be able to make the determination, do they qualify or not, based upon those circumstances?
Yes.
So if you were to hire somebody who you were going to qualify for this program that would be spending 90% of their time in those rural counties, even though they're launching out of your location, I would say, yes, that makes sense.
It just says practice veterinary medicine in the county.
Right.
In that rural county.
So this committee should have the flexibility to approve that, or not.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, it won't matter if they reside in the county or not. It's really where are they working.
Put a trailer house and post.
So if we're comfortable leaving that as it is for now, I did see there's instead of a dash on number 3, there's just a single dash, so I'm going to add a second dash there. Right, so we're through 8, so we'll continue up with 9.
Licensed veterinarian, a person licensed by the Texas Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners under Texas Occupations Code, Chapter 801, to practice veterinary medicine. 10, obligated service period, a period equal to 12 consecutive months in which a participant agrees to provide full-time veterinary medical services in a rural county or counties under the Rural Veterinarian Incentive Program. 11, qualifying disability. A person is considered to have a qualifying disability if the person, A, cannot work and engage in substantial gainful activity because of their medical condition, B, cannot perform work done previously or adjust to other work because of their medical condition, or C, has a long-term condition or terminal illness. 12, program. The Rural Veterinarian Incentive Program established by Texas Education Code, Subchapter G, Sections 56.101 through 56.106. 13, participant, a person who is selected to receive loan repayment assistance from the Rural Veterinarian Incentive Program. 14, rural county, a county in the state of Texas with a population of 100,000 or less.
Okay, so on 13, we are going to change a person who is selected to receive loan repayment assistance or payment of tuition and fees from the Rural Veterinary Incentive Program.
Can we go back to item 10?
Yes.
And I may have forgotten the obligated service period from our previous discussions. That just surprised me when I saw a period equal to 12 consecutive months.
Yes.
Can we clarify that?
So, so the statute requires basically a year-for-year assistance. So for every year of tuition and fees that the program assists with, they have to work for a year. And so this is basically defining that year that they have to work as the reason why it's defined as this is so later on when we're using it, every time we say obligated service period, we mean these 12 months that you promised to work under the program. Do you think it needs further clarification?
Well, I had expected to see a longer duration over time of.
Well, I did too, and I don't remember in the last discussion.
I mean, we talked about it,
We talked about a
5 years.
commitment. So where in the statute does it say that? 'Cause I don't remember that.
So,
So it's 56, 106, 91, requires assistant director in relation to rural county for one calendar year for each academic year.
So then the max would be 4 years of rural fire. They would only.
They receive it. It's hard to
that's going to be,
that with.
right. Right. So essentially, it's going to be, it's a one-for-one. Later on in the rules, we do have sort of a maximum minimum. If you do want to extend the maximum to 5 years versus 4 years, that's an option. But, I mean, the standard vet school is 4 years. So I think, I'm sure the legislature envisions just a 4-year obligated service period.
So the student or recipient would just receive 1 year at a time of payment, right? They wouldn't get the whole loan repayment
Correct.
at once.
Well, they could.
Okay.
That's where there's a little bit of flexibility in the agreement and how the committee ultimately decides to award something to a particular participant. If the participant wants to commit all 4 years, the committee has the option of awarding assistance for all 4 years.
If someone is within 4 years of after graduation, applies to the program, how do you determine the 1 year of 1 year for each academic year for which the participant receives financial support?
So that's basically going to be on the loan evaluation end. So when the Higher Education Coordinating Board will evaluate what loans this particular student has, they can, if, let's say they manage to pay for themselves through scholarships and just working their first 2 years, but they have 2 years of loans that they need assistance with. The most that that individual would have in obligated service would be 2 years because that's the most we could pay towards their tuition and fees. So it's really going to be individual based on the particular participant's loans, schooling, and then how long they work in the community.
So if trying to understand this, so someone graduated last year and they have $150,000 in debt, and, and this committee, selected them for repayment, could they get that all paid off then? I mean,
Yes.
how do you how many years do they have to work?
How many years that?
The committee would.
I thought we were, back to the 5-year model, I thought this whole thing was to get them into these small communities and keep them there.
Yeah. I think that is the long-term goal of the program. Unfortunately, with some of the fundings the $1 million that we have in the program right now, we have those time restrictions. So we might not be able to achieve that goal with this particular funding. So with the $1 million that we have, the goal is to spend that for people who qualify for it. What we could, in the future, because this creates a conditional loan, so if a person agrees while they're still a student to commit themselves to practice in a rural community upon graduation, this program could pay for their tuition and fees or forgive their loans they've currently taken out. After they graduate and begin practicing, for each year that they've actually worked in that rural community, we basically wipe that year of debt off of their books. If for some reason they no longer work in the rural community, they decide, no, I'm going to go move to Houston and start practicing there, the amount that the program has paid for them becomes a loan that they are obligated to repay to the program. It's essentially a conditional loan. So their debt is wiped away if they perform the obligated service. If they don't perform the obligated service, they then need to repay the program.
So their interest is their work in that community, basically.
Yes.
So, okay, we say veterinary college is 4 years, but it really is longer than that because you have to do the requirements to be able to apply and to get in. So somebody has borrowed $150,000, $100 of that is spent at A&M at the vet school, but the previous $50 is spent at another college to be able to apply. Wouldn't those funds and years apply to this program?
The statute's pretty specific that it is for veterinary medical school.
I didn't see that in here.
See if we can.
Sorry to ask that
No, it's
question, but I just wanted to
No,
make sure that.
it's actually good that we get all the clarification now versus after. We don't want to have to re-clarify after the rule has been published. So this is the time to do it.
And if we want to move on for sake of discussion, if somebody else looks at it, we can come back to it later if you want.
Definition of college.
Yeah, so it's going to be under 106B. The financial support received by an eligible participant under this subchapter must be used to retire student loan debt or to pay tuition and fees to the university system while the eligible participant is enrolled in the college, and college is defined as a vet school in the statute.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
So, Jenny, that makes me think that when you were talking early on, when you were saying that the expense has to have been incurred after a certain date, I mean, is that, so that, would that set a limit going backward on how far?
Yeah, but I think that natural limit might occur just when we start the program and when we accept applicants. So the expense has to be under the federal money. The expense had to be incurred after, I think it was March 2021.
So when new graduates say, or in May, new graduates apply to this, it would only be for debt incurred after that 2020.
Yeah, just to make sure we're following the parameters of the federal funding.
But in future...
In future, it will, if we get an appropriation this year, we really won't have that limitation.
And you just have to have the funds, like, if somebody graduates, they're only going to get that 1 year, and they're committed to 1 year, and then the next year they get another amount or whatever.
Yeah, and
Does it have to be given to them all, like, you know, you say that we have to have the funds allotted, I guess,
mhm.
but it doesn't have to be distributed by November 7th or whatever, right?
It does because of the conditional nature of our loan, of this loan program. So, so the only way to guarantee that the loan would be forgiven, or the debt would be canceled, I should say, is if we have that full year of participation. So if we promise to pay them for another year, we would still have this money on our books. And there's a chance that we would commit it to that particular individual, but there's a chance that they wouldn't fulfill their end of the bargain and would go back to the pot.
So really, we can only give them 1 year.
Yeah, we'd be, under this particular funding source, with the deadline that we currently have, we're going to be looking at a really narrow scope of eligible applicants. Now, if that scope widens up, we will be able to expand that applicant pool.
Under the current funding, if someone applies and they've got 2 year debt that was incurred in 2 eligible years, and the committee decided to give them a lump sum to cover the debt for those 2 eligible years, they would have a conditional loan for 2 years. So
Correct.
even though they got 1 lump sum, they've still got 2 years of commitment.
Yes, correct. And then once that year of service is done, then that portion of the loan basically disappears, no longer becomes conditional. They're no longer obligated to repay that portion. So what this particular source of funding does require a lot of needle threading to try to find somebody who both qualifies under this program and would qualify to receive the funds, and also clears our books of the money. Yeah.
But they're going to be paid up front, and it's conditional on them practicing.
Mm-hmm.
So if they don't, then it's the higher education board that becomes the bank, and they're
Yes.
off the universities.
And ultimately, the money comes back into the program.
I understand.
Yeah, so.
They're administering it, so they're the one that's got to go, they got to go collect the debt.
Oh, yeah, the committee won't have to go do that. But the university right now is going to be the loan holders under the current statute.
I understand.
And hoping that changes to the board.
Yeah, you guys don't want that.
So under number 10 here, the committee could be receiving an application, somebody who says, I just want to do this for 1 year.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. And the committee could then consider whether or not they want to select that applicant, and I think that's going to be some of the eligibility criteria. We could add, if it's not in there already, we can certainly add something that we can give more weight to somebody who wants to commit for longer.
Yeah. Ultimately, the bill could be changed.
Yes. And that's, of course, I think we're hoping that it changes.
But the year-for-year service could be changed in the bill as well.
Yes. Right now, that's currently not proposed.
Right.
Sorry.
That's going on.
So someone who's graduated and has 4 years of debt, you're going to give them their entire, whatever they owe, give them that entire amount. And then they have to, work in a rural community for 4 years.
Yes.
Okay. So it's not given every year. Well, after these funds are gone, we technically don't have to give it all at once.
No.
Correct?
No, you basically will come up with so let's forget the limitations for a second. Let's say we just have this pot of money that the committee can use for this program. The committee then can decide what sort of agreement they want with that individual to participate.
So the only reason that this is all being given in one lump sum right now is because of November 7th.
Yes.
After November 7th and after this art money is gone, whatever rules we set forth, like you work a year, then you're reimbursed for that year, we could do that.
Yeah, that could be part.
We wouldn't have to give them 4 years up front and then wait for them to serve those 4 years because we don't have a deadline on our money. We could let them serve a year and then give them money.
Yeah, I think the intent of the statute is to do lump sum to try to keep the debt off, keep their student loans off of their books. or provide the scholarship, provide the tuition and fees directly through the university.
Because the last time we talked, which obviously this is a lot different than the last time we talked, but the last time we talked about reimbursing them as they serve, didn't we?
Yeah, and I think it sort of has that same functional effect.
Not
or
reimburse or loan forgiving.
Right, that they receive a payment, and I believe the statute does allow for the Higher Education Coordinating Board to release periodic payments or a lump sum. So there is an option.
The only good thing is if they don't serve, that loan is then reinitiated and the state will collect their money.
I mean, that's the one advantage to keep them in service when they know their loan. If they're waiting on a payment, that gives them a little bit more incentive to not continue with the program versus if they've received the payment and they know that will become a loan if they don't fulfill their obligation.
So under that 1606C, does say the financial support
The recruits, right?
a lump sum. Does that dictate a single lump sum, or is that a lump sum once per year? Sorry, I don't mean to kick.
No. No need to apologize. This is important that we get it right.
And would that section then maybe prohibit the payment directly to a university? It's got to go to the participant and lender or other holder of a loan.
Yeah, that was one of the stick-ups.
Conflict with.
And then if you go to, if you go to 61.9965, which is the account statute. It does allow a lump sum to the participant university. But yeah, lump sum is, you're right, lump sum is what's contemplated by the statute.
So what's the hang-up with the lump sum? If they were to get it all up front, is that the conflict?
I think, I just wouldn't want to be the collector.
You won't be.
Well, I know,
Yeah,
but my point is will it get collected? The reason I don't want to be the collector is because I know I ain't going to get it collected.
Mm-hmm.
I know the Attorney General's pretty good at.
Yeah, I was going to say so the Attorney General, so once there is a default, so it could potentially go to the Attorney General, or they just enter a repayment program with the Higher Education Coordinating Board. State of Texas does go after their debts. But there is no direct timeline of when the program itself would be able to recoup that money. I mean, I guess if that's one of your concerns that you're thinking of, that we have.
Well, my thing is, you can garnish their wages just like the Attorney General does, but you're going to get $25 every paycheck. You know what I mean?
So there'd be
money to fund someone that's actually going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's always the risk, right? I mean, it's always going to be the risk that somebody doesn't fulfill their portion of the obligation, and that money is tied up in litigation or collections.
Right.
Part of our discussion last time too, I think, Courtney, was the pros and cons of doing partial payment, and so you don't get the next payment until you commit it, versus being able to retire debt today and preclude you having to capitalize unpaid interest on that debt.
Right,
and then converting that real debt into a conditional debt for so many years in front of you.
Right. I mean, I just feel like I remember us talking about a 5-year program that you pay for 1 year at a time, I guess, basically, and do it all up front to get rid of the interest that you're going to pay, but maybe not pay for all 5 years at once.
Yeah, and it really sounds like the statute and the way it's set up, it's really designed to, whatever the amount awarded, they would get that all at once. But you have discretion of deciding how much to be awarded, what the obligation period for the particular particular participant is and those types of things.
Right.
Yeah, so if we just wanted to award them for 2 years.
They could award them and then not give them the money until they start, technically.
No, when they enter the agreement, it's sort of, when they sign the promissory notes and enter the agreement, it's basically the money would be awarded at that time, or would be funded however their particular agreement requires the funding.
But if you wanted to give more money to more people, then I guess you
Yeah, so that's one option of, instead of requiring everybody to be obligated for 4 years and you pay whatever their amount for the 4 years would be, you could pay more people for 2 years of service. That's really going to be I would envision that would be those decisions we made after you see what the applicant pool for a particular year would look like.
I know we're kind of hung up on this 5-year deal, but if I have to trade 5 years for 4, it's still better than 3.
Oh, I agree, for sure. I just was under the impression that we had this big discussion and that we weren't given $200,000 on day one of employment, and then leaving collection to another agency to try to get the money back when they jump ship.
Well, this is even potentially giving the $200,000, $180,000, whatever, while they're still a student. I mean, that's also what this program envisions. And obviously, if you're still in vet school and you've gotten all your tuition and fees covered all at once, that does actually help you kind of channel your studies to go into a rural community. So, I mean, there is definitely some benefit kind of long-term.
Yeah, that's the thing I would say is the number one stressor for folks not going into rural practice is that debt. How am I going to pay my debt? So you go somewhere else, work in emergency duty for 3 or 4 years to pay off your debt. This now would remove that stress and anxiety and how am I going to pay my bills? It's done. They're not going to have to pay interest on that money. All they got to do is go show up and go work. So there is that benefit. So what's worse, the risk of them defaulting on their note or the benefit of them actually going to the community and serving? So I guess that's what we have to weigh.
No, because I feel like if they knew that it was coming, they would go. But I don't know. I know a lot of people that made commitments that backed out on them. You know what I mean? So,
I mean, just think about
what
how...
is it to death, though? I mean, you got to poop or get off the pot. Just say, there it is. And you don't pay it, 90 days, Leroy.
Well, I would hope our profession continues to have the integrity that it's had, over the years. Very few deadbeat veterinarians.
I think Guy and I are going to have to be, and I'm sure Guy will be, very intentional as to how this program is explained to our students, so that there is commitment up front for the right kind of student with regard to this, to prevent many of the problems that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think the selection of the participants is going to be critical for that. So I do want to, so the Higher Education Coordinating Board does have experience doing similar programs with physicians in rural communities. So we do have some additional guidance from them on how that works. And so far, when they've administered the program and had funds for the program, it has worked out very well. So there is sort of some light that, although we haven't seen it in veterinarians, we do have similar programs in Texas that have been very successful.
So paying it as a lump sum also helps us use the funds up. We definitely have a short fuse on this. If it doesn't get changed, but it's, disperse funds up front or, as a lump sum.
Yeah, and it definitely sounds like the goal of the committee is to let's make the most of the money that we have when we have it, so.
And we did talk about the person doesn't necessarily have to stay in that same job or county. If they were to go to another rural county, they still get the money.
Correct.
Yes.
What is the average 4-year debt for y'all's institutions? What kind of dollars are we looking at if they were to borrow for everything?
Our students are presently leaving with a average median debt of about $96K. ranges all the way from 0 to 250.
What is the tuition and fees per year?
Oh, I'll get that number for you later.
Is it like 30, 40, something along those?
About 40.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Sorry, that's nothing to do with years or, but I was wondering, since we added the, and I was okay to ask, since we added the payment of tuition and all those, is there any definition we're missing that we might need to financial assistance on that? Or is there anything that's missing? Because all of this stuff.
Right.
I was just wondering if there's any.
That's a great point, Myra. Anything that you guys feel is missing. And with that in mind, too, as we go through the rest of the rules, if a term catches your eye that you think needs further definition, that it's not obvious, we can also add additional definitions in this section.
Does recent graduate, I know it's in the rule, but does, in the beginning, when you just said the, say the person,
Mm-hmm.
you need to define recent graduate.
So recent graduate is defined by the enabling statute itself. It's somebody who anniversary date is within, or it's within 4 years of, their application is within 4 years of their anniversary date of graduation. Okay, let's move on to the next section.
I actually have one. The definition of rural county, I know HRB is looking at extending to 50 if you want to
Okay.
target the county in there, so I was thinking maybe if we just tie that to the same definition of rural county as defined by chapter whatever.
That would also give us some additional flexibility. Okay. Let's just look that up really quick. So for the committee members who want to look at the statute, it's in section 56-101, and it's definition 7. So if that changes by statute, that also gives us some flexibility of applying whatever the current law is. So we can change 14 to rural county, has the same meaning assigned by Texas Education Code subsection G, section 56.1017. That way it always just refers back to the statute.
I like it.
Okay.
That way when they change it, we don't have to.
Rural county, and then the definition section, has the meaning assigned by Texas Education Code, subchapter G, section 56.1017.
Still struggling with who qualifies for the program. Just say a scenario, say I've been out of school 3 years, I graduated in 2020. All right, all of my debt was incurred before 21, but yet, I mean, I'm practicing in a rural area, could I still qualify for the program?
You could qualify for the program, you may not qualify for the specific source of funding. So there's two different questions.
This first tranche, if you didn't incur the debt after 21, you don't get money.
Yeah, it's gonna be really, I mean,
In narrow scope.
it's gonna be very, yeah, narrow. So somebody who might otherwise qualify, or if we get additional funding, we can also maybe modify their agreement. But for right now, we have limited funds that we can award. So yes, they would qualify under the program. No, they may not qualify to receive ARPA funds. Or they would qualify to just receive, no ARPA funds.
I predict we're gonna have a very few applicants that qualify, and they're gonna get a lot of money.
Well, the good thing is, we want this program to be successful, right?
Mhm.
And those two gentlemen have people in their programs who I think they could funnel and recommend to us that right out of the box, we're gonna be successful. And this is our opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I mean, this could make a real, I mean, even if we just have a few, even if ultimately there's just a few recipients, it can make a huge difference to several rural communities. So that now you have a veterinarian there that doesn't have to worry about their student loans.
So, when this may not be a very good question, but when we award the funds, is it for service, the obligated service period after those funds are awarded? Or could it be before? It doesn't matter.
It can be before.
Okay, so you have a graduate that graduated in 2021. They have 1 year of eligible, well, it wouldn't be a year, but maybe they're going to graduate in May. They have a year of eligible enrollment or fees they're eligible for repayment. And let's say I guess they'd have to apply now. I was just wondering if there was a back date, like somebody that graduated in 2021, if they applied now, would it repay their year they've been out in a rural practice?
Yes, you can decide to do that.
You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yes, and I think that is something we can decide, the committee can decide to do.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be, you can award people for future service or for...
You can go ahead, yes, you can go ahead and forgive that past service.
Okay.
So that might be the ideal applicant for the ARPA funds, is somebody who...
Well, that's what I was thinking. It may give us more people
Mhm.
to choose
It's a
from.
good idea.
And that then eliminates the debt for that person who's been working in the rural community, so they can continue to work in the rural community.
And that, there's a bunch of them out there.
Mhm. Anything else about the definitions before we move on?
42.7, dissemination of information. A, as part of its administration, the commission shall disseminate information about the program to schools of veterinary medicine in this state, appropriate state agencies, interested professional associations, and the public. B, at least 60 calendar days before the deadline to submit an application, the commission shall publish on its website the application and any forms required to be completed as part of the application. 2, the deadline for an applicant to submit the application. 3, instructions to applicants on how to complete, and submit the application. 4, the method or methods of submission for the application. And 5, a copy of the scoring rubric for the application.
Okay, so on 3, we're going to change the word compete to complete.
And given the timeline that you went through for this year, that 60-day calendar period, is that going to affect us greatly in being able to quickly get in applications in May or whenever it is?
Yeah, so we can modify this period's always can be modified. This is just a suggestion. So if we get the rules adopted and published as part of the administrative code in May, then you're looking about being able to select applicants in the summer and probably awarded in the fall.
What if we just change that to at least 30 days in case we need, because of delays, unforeseen?
Yeah.
We can make it 90 days if we want, but that just gives us more flexibility.
Okay. Is that agreeable to everyone? Okay. So essentially, this would be the period of time that an application would be available and open. it creates a minimum of 30 days, but it doesn't prevent allowing a longer deadline. All right. Anything else for this section?
As a part of A, given the proposed rule where they took out colleges necessarily, but is there veterinary medicine in this state, do we need to change that?
So this is also, again, like, how does the committee want to direct the commission to disseminate information? So right now, we just have it disseminated to the 2 vet schools in this state. I don't know if the committee wants us to distribute it to all vet schools. We can certainly change that. This is sort of the mandatory language.
I think this language is not all-inclusive, so it would be the minimum.
Right, this is the minimum.
I would think at this stage, having it as the minimum doesn't exclude you from posting it more broadly.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And I think the ultimate goal is to try to reach the broadest audience possible that we think would want to participate. So, and I think also public, like, we'll have it on our commission website, and try to reach out to people who could help filter us, potential applicants to our website. But certainly to the 2 vet schools in Texas is definitely our prime target.
But even if you're a student at another vet school, I think you have to have graduated from a Texas high school.
Yes, under the current,
Correct.
right, under the current statute. So that would be one of the things that we would screen applications for to make sure they qualify. Okay, done with this rule. So the one, so I have 2 changes noted. Under B, it will be changed to at least 30 calendar days before the deadline to submit an application. The commission shall publish on its website. And then on B3, it will be changed to instructions to applicants on how to complete and submit the application. Right.
Eligibility. A, to be eligible for the Rural Veterinarian Incentive Program, an applicant must, 1, be an eligible veterinary student or graduate in accordance with Texas Education Code, Section 56.104, at the time the applicant submits their application. 2, be a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident. 3, not be currently fulfilling another obligation to provide veterinary medical services as part of a scholarship agreement, an educational loan agreement, or another educational loan repayment agreement. 4, have received an eligible education loan for at least 50% of the funds for tuition and fees for 1 or more academic years while enrolled in an accredited college of veterinary medicine. 5, specify the county or counties in which the applicant is practicing or intends to practice veterinary medicine full-time to qualify for the loan repayment assistance. And 6, be otherwise eligible to receive payment from the funding source.
So many of these eligibility requirements are statutory in nature. The one that is based on, the one that I've included that's based on the last meeting you held was number 5, specify the county or counties in which the applicant is practicing or intends to practice veterinary medicine. So this is not a statutory requirement, but I think the committee wanted some indication of where the particular participant would be practicing, so they kind of have a commitment to a particular community. I don't think that prevents an applicant or a participant from changing where they practice as long as it still qualifies as a rural community, but that was added specifically for the committee's discussion that we want somebody already having a connection with a county.
Can you remind me what the statute says about the eligible veterinary student? Did it say 3rd or 4th year? Did it specify?
No, it did not specify. So it's to be an eligible student under the current statute requires to be at one of the Texas vet schools or to be at an out-of-state vet school but had been a high school graduate or attended a college in Texas. So this is...
It can apply at any point in your veterinary school career.
Yes. Yeah, I guess you do have to be a currently enrolled student. I guess that's the only limitation, or actually graduated. And I think I guess it also even contemplates a scenario of like you had a student transfer from out of state into one of our state schools. If they're currently enrolled in our state schools, they're covered. So even if part of their education took place at another school, as long as they're currently enrolled, graduated from one of our Texas schools.
So does the high school portion of it say graduated from a Texas high school, or do they have to have so much time in a Texas high school, or does it specify?
It says attended a...
Just graduated.
Graduated from... Oh, graduated. Is the other one attended a...
Or a general academic teaching
Okay, so then it is
institution
graduated.
located in this state.
So the general academic teaching institution basically is all of our Texas state university systems or other accredited colleges in the state of Texas.
Okay.
Sometimes you'll see the wording "in good academic standing" put in situations like this. That I just wonder whether that's important or not when you're looking at applicants like this. There may be people who've got disciplinary actions against them or a number of things like that, and I wonder whether it would be important to consider that that's often typical wording in eligibility requirements for a variety of things.
Right. And then in determining eligibility of the students, the committee really has a lot of discretion. There's some of these statutory eligibility requirements, but you also have the discretion about what other eligibility requirements as are reasonable. So something like good academic standing certainly is a reasonable requirement. So is that something the committee would like to add to the eligibility requirements?
Would that fall under eligibility or under evaluation?
It could fall under both. So if it's under eligibility, if a currently enrolled student is not in good academic standing, they would be ineligible to participate. If it's just an evaluation criteria that you want to use, then it wouldn't make them ineligible for the program, but it may not have them rank high enough to receive the program funding. So think of eligibility as mandatory requirements and evaluation as where you have flexibility to rank a particular applicant. But once you make it...
It will limit your applicants, in my mind, which I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's always something you can put a big X on.
I think it should belong in the evaluation part.
I agree.
What does good academic standing mean?
Yeah, well, typically we have to sign off on that officially that shows that this person is not on, for example, academic probation, or that there are no disciplinary actions pending for this student. So that's sort of an official sign-off that typically would come from my office, whereas you might not know that if we looked at it for eligibility later on and just said, is this, from our perspective, is this person in good academic standing? So there's a certain level of official sign-off on good academic standing, and I'm just posing the question as to whether that is important in this kind of situation.
I wonder if it's something we could include on the application. That would be hard for somebody that's already graduated, though.
Well, so the thing...
Current.
It's only current students, but something that we could still do a sign-off type of question on the application if you're a current student or whatever. Yeah.
And it ought to go under eligibility. They're not eligible if they're not in good standing.
Well,
Student,
so, I mean, I guess the scenario is if somebody is not considered in good academic standing when they're on academic probation also gives them an opportunity to come into good standing.
Remediate, yeah.
Yeah, so do you want to eliminate anybody who had a bad semester?
I just feel like if our elimination should be on evaluation just to give us more scope, you know what I mean, and more leeway for you or us as a committee to decide what good standing actually is.
Here's the other consideration for the committee. Things that you have put on the eligibility requirement, the commission is going to screen for. So if we have screened an applicant saying that they're not eligible because they didn't meet the requirements in this eligibility list, you as a committee may never look at that application. So this is, I mean, basically, this list would make somebody ineligible to participate in the program. So there is some mindfulness taken about what should be included and what should not be included. So we really do have the statutory requirements, and like I said, right now the only additional reasonable requirement that we added is that they specify which county or counties they intend to work in or they currently work in.
So it sounds like you would like to see it in evaluation criteria.
I'd like it.
I think so. It just gives you a little more leeway.
Yeah, especially, I mean, if you're considering a student too, seeing you don't see their work practice, but you'll see their academic prowess, so that's a good evaluation criteria.
Well, there may be, I don't know, there may be a situation where somebody like Dr. August would sign off and put an explanation of some sort. You know what I mean? That may have gotten screened before.
Well, there'll be we can have on the application opportunity if somebody is not in good standing to explain why.
Right.
But would that get to us? Because if it's at the eligibility level,
If we
would
put
never see it.
If we put it in the eligibility level and they click and they mark, I am not in good standing, then you would not see that application. If it's in the evaluation portion, doesn't matter if they put that they're not in good standing or not, you would be able to view that application.
I'd rather us view it as doing under evaluation.
Yeah.
Good point, though, that it needs to be there.
So we'll add it when we get to that section.
Okay. Now, is there any other eligibility bars that you would like to include?
I would suggest that if they're a practicing veterinarian, they probably their license should be in good standing at time of application. So no one on any kind of suspension or anything like that. I think that might be something for consideration.
In good standing without restriction, or what is the particular language that the vet board uses?
I would say probably just licensed in good standing, because that would be anybody that's not currently on an active suspension, probated suspension, or anything like that.
That would not mean somebody that has a case.
Right. If you have an open complaint, that wouldn't qualify, or if you have disciplinary actions that's lesser than a suspension, that wouldn't be indicated there.
Okay. Let's see how we do. Do you want to require a graduate to have a license in Texas?
Yes.
Yeah. I think it was on there, wasn't it? Was it not?
I mean, if they're
Just
be licensed to practice in Texas.
Yeah, they have to be licensed.
So I have that, so I sort of have some language about that in the evaluation, but we have right now we have no eligibility rule to,
I think if they're not a student, that they should be licensed in the state of Texas.
okay.
That has to be, I mean, if that's the case, y'all wouldn't even look at the applicants.
Because we don't want to get them in a situation where they have been accepted to this program, and then if we deny them licensure, that
they never will be able to practice.
Exactly.
Do they need to have a license by X date after graduation, or?
No,
I think just
open.
upon,
I mean, typically you get it before you're unenrolled, don't you?
Yeah, but there may be a situation where you have a person that goes into industry where they don't need their license, they leave for a year, and then they come back and they want to practice. You know, maybe they move to Missouri, and they're there for a year, so they don't have a Texas license, but they want to come back.
Right.
I don't want to limit that.
so if not an enrolled student, they just have to be licensed by the time of their application.
Yeah, we have licensed veterinarian as a defined term. So if an applicant is a graduate at the time of application, they must be a licensed veterinarian. Okay, so I'm going to, so number 5 is going to remove the word "and" at the end. I'm going to add the word "and," add a semicolon and the word "and" after 6. And as number 7, add, if an applicant is a graduate at the time of application, comma, they must be a licensed veterinarian.
In the state of Texas.
So licensed veterinarian is defined, so we don't have to specify that. No, that's okay.
Do we want to use the applicant instead of they, just to remove any ambiguity?
Oh, so it's, have
Yes.
it, yes, let's do that. The applicant.
But I see what you're saying, like if someone is applying, but they don't, like said they've been in the industry or another state, and they don't have their Texas license, and maybe they're not planning on moving to Texas unless they get this funding.
Yeah, but it's,
Eliminate those people?
Yeah.
but I'd rather the uncertainty sit with them and rather than the funding.
Okay.
Or, that's what, I think my thought, and maybe Brittany had that same idea, let the uncertainty sit with the applicant versus the funding and the program. Yes. Yes, adding,
I know, we definitely people disagree.
add an and
Their bar is
at
a
the end
little.
of 6.
Oh.
Big otherwise.
Here, let to the left.
Right.
Okay, if an applicant is a graduate at the time of the application, they must be, okay, so we'll change they to the applicant. And then we'll add a comma after app. Okay, so now the added rule or eligibility requirement 7 is if an applicant is a graduate at the time of application, comma, the applicant must be a licensed veterinarian, period. Anything else?
.11, application review for initial screening. Each application shall be screened by the commission for eligibility and completeness. It's a long one.
Sounds good.
Okay, so the decision time here, so lunch is here, we can break here or tackle this and then pause in the middle of it. What's the purpose?
So that this next section is going to get a little meaty.
Yes.
So it might be a good time for everybody to take a break.
We'll adjourn for lunch for about 15 or 20 minutes. Okay, we'll reconvene the meeting. We have all 8 who were here, signed in earlier this morning. Meeting, so we'll reconvene at 12:15. Continue discussion of the rules, and I believe we're on 42.13. Application, evaluation, and selection process. Jabbar.
Subsection A, evaluation criteria. The following criteria will be used to evaluate applicants. 1, a personal statement indicating a background and interest in rural veterinary practice. 2, experience in an active veterinary medical practice in a rural county. Excuse me. 3, experience as a licensed veterinarian in Texas. 4, relevant work or volunteer experience related to rural veterinary medicine. 5, involvement in professional or educational activities relating to rural veterinary medicine. 6, coursework related to rural veterinary medicine. 7, involvement in educational or personal activities of a rural nature. And 8, financial need.
So I just want to point out, so number 1 and number 8 on this evaluation list are contemplated by the statute. The statute asked for evaluation will be done based on interest and background in rural veterinary practice and also financial need. So that's why those are included. I know at the last meeting, the committee discussed removing financial need as a evaluation criteria, but it is contemplated by the statute. And of course, financial need could be demonstrated just by the fact that the individual had to take out student loans.
If that was the case, right, that defines eligibility. And so if they've got a financial need, then it's equivalent to half of 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
That makes them eligible.
Right. The reason why it needs to be included in evaluation is because the statute asks that the committee evaluate the applicants based on that factor. So you do have complete discretion to give it very low weight.
And these other items that are here, where did they come from? So 1 and 8 are from the statute, so.
1 and 8 are directly from the statute. The rest were basically based on the discussion that you had at the last meeting. So this is what I interpreted that discussion to be, the kind of things that you would be looking for in a particular applicant. But this is where we can add additional evaluation criteria. So what is on this list would be the types of items that we would ask an applicant to provide. So work history, it could be, encompassed in their CV or their resume, or it could be encompassed in a personal statement. But these bullet points or these numbers would be the things that the rubric would sort of be able to rank a person. So a person with more experience in veterinary practice would receive a higher score than a person with less.
This is where we would put the suggestion from Dr. August?
Yes. So one of the suggestions is that if they apply as a student, they be in good standing with their school.
Good academic standing.
What is the specific term that the universities use?
I think it's that. I think it's
Good
a good academic standing.
Great. What about the letters of recommendation? Is this where we would put that?
Yes. So that is definitely something that the federal application requires 3 mandatory letters of recommendation. So you have a decision whether or not you want to require letters of recommendation. You want to just allow people to get, as a category that you can help weigh their applications if they have them or if they don't.
I think to Courtney's concern about, is this person somebody that's going to finish what they started, that's where we can help evaluate that. So I think 3 is a good number, but like
I think if the feds require it too, let's just keep it at 3.
Okay.
What about the Brittany, you're concerned about the license in good standing? Is this where we put, is that one of the eligibility things? Or
Okay, so maybe just as we have to have a student in good standing, do we also then want somebody, a graduate who is licensed must be in good standing? Or
yes,
is it,
weeded out.
That was it was going to be weeded out because it was
Well,
originally,
so the eligibility, I think that they have to be licensed as a veterinarian, if they are out of school. But I think once we get into application evaluation, the evaluation period, there should be some kind of license in good standing.
So if we require a person who's a student to certify that they're a student in good standing, we should also have the licensed veterinarian then certify they're licensed in good standing.
The board does issue certificates of good standing, so or a letter of good standing. So.
Okay.
What are thoughts about, federal accreditation or authorized personnel status with us? If they're practicing vets, so that, our authorized personnel program is very similar to federal accreditation, but if they get someone who's messing up, not doing CVIs properly, whatever they're doing, or not doing well, they could be in trouble with us.
Are you? Is the intent like our authorized vet program is an optional program, but it does target a lot of vets in a rural community because they're doing the type of testing on animals that you would have in a rural community.
But you can still have a small animal only person in a rural community.
Correct.
Right.
So do you give them bonus points for being an authorized personnel with us, or is it not even something that's reached the evaluation criteria?
I wouldn't put it as a, like a bonus points to be in the program, but to be in good standing. But you make a valid point, Dr.
Well,
Clayton.
it happens, and this state has changed, what it used to be. I just think licensed and good, be properly licensed and good standing should cover it.
I have a question about coursework related to rural veterinary medicine. So if this includes small animal practice, what coursework would we count? What could be counted related to?
Well, I think it's all appropriate. I mean, because what do you not see in Jourdanton, Texas?
Spanish 101. No, all kidding aside, I don't know, specific coursework, it's all over the board anymore. Truly, it's changed that much. So I don't know that we can specify,
The only thing I could see is that there are now a lot of alternative tracks that students are allowed, and if somebody's doing an industry track where they have a very creative fourth year that doesn't include rural practice, I would think we would take that under consideration.
and that's part of evaluation, we can take it into consideration. And
I think the externships too would fall there, the required externships, potentially.
And coursework does not necessarily need to be completed. I assume that it could be, I am enrolled in externship or programs that I'll do next summer.
So the idea is if you wanted to see their transcripts, or if you wanted wanted them to provide, if they provided an unofficial transcript of their vet school records, you would be able to sort of get an idea about their coursework they took, and then you would hope in their personal statement they would talk about how that coursework, garnered an interest in rural practice. So it would be on the applicant to kind of tie it all together for the committee.
Does that number 3, I'm sorry, experience as a licensed veterinarian, does that weight it more toward, veterinarians who are out in practice over a student or something?
I don't think you weight them over that. I just think you need to know what that experience is.
Andy, I think that was the point of my question earlier today, was that would be not applicable for a student, so therefore
You shouldn't count against them.
It should have a different numerator and denominator.
Yeah, so we could almost have a student evaluation criteria and then a licensed veterinarian criteria. And then, depending on the source of the funding and who you would want to award to.
I mean, you could actually separate it out. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you could separate it out.
Separate it out.
I don't think you want to penalize a student because he hasn't had the opportunity. But you also don't want to, you have somebody that's been practicing and
Has shown no interest in it, so how do we know?
That's been doing it for a couple of years, and that should be a plus.
Yeah.
Any other item on there that might be eliminated at any particular circumstance?
So I just think if you keep number 6 here, we're going to get down in the weeds on that one. If you're going to look at it as an item as it is there, why not roll it in to number 1 in the personal statement and have the applicant talk about appropriate academic or professional preparation for the position to which she or he is applying, something like that. I think roll it in there. Otherwise, we're going to be looking at transcripts. We don't need to be looking at that. And
that's a great point. Just put an and then move 6 up.
Yeah. Good idea.
Maybe captured a little bit in 7, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to include, have 1 as it is, or do you want to include, sort of, do a personal statement indicating background and interest in rural veterinary practice, including information on professional or educational development,
academic or professional
this is also something
activities that prepare.
Yeah, this is also something we don't necessarily have to define in the rule, but we can define on the application to give them suggestions of what they should talk about.
That makes sense.
What if you just combined 6 and 7?
Well, I guess that's the point that was made is do we even need those if we're already going to ask them to provide a personal statement indicating their background and interest?
I think we'll just get bogged down in the weeds if we're looking at coursework, you know, and why not let the applicant elaborate on her or his academic and professional activities that help prepare them for this particular position.
And that way, the bulk of the scoring will be on their personal statement, which I think you could probably learn a lot from the applicant from.
Absolutely. Right. I like that better.
Okay, so we want to then eliminate 6 and 7?
If you do that, would you want to put in number 1, a personal statement indicating a background, education, and interests?
I would elaborate. I'd elaborate education. I think you have to think about academic and/or professional preparation or something like that, so that because it may well be that a new graduate's been taking CE and things like that could they'd want to include.
Are they going to submit a CV also? I mean, all that stuff should be on a CV, right?
Yeah, we can have them submit a CV. That kind of encompasses some of these other, if you wanted to sort of score their background and interest and stuff, that would be encompassed by a CV or resume.
So for simplicity, just strike 6 and 7. Is that what we're saying?
I think so.
Mm-hmm. And then those items would be encompassed by the background. So what we could do is add a resume or CV as one of the evaluation criteria.
Probably going to do that anyway.
Yeah, it's not listed on this list right now, so if we wanted to add it, to have it almost as a requirement for the application.
I think absolutely it should be a requirement.
Okay.
And I think back to 1, just a personal statement, just as it says, a background and interest, and leave it open and let them sell themselves. Let them tell us why and what they've done. If we start, again, talking about Dr. August, getting bogged down in the weeds here, we say educational, well, that opens up another box. So.
On the evaluation criteria, is there an alignment to a certain type of practice, not just a variation of the practice?
No, I think so one of the discussions that the committee had last time is that I believe the committee was pretty adamant that we don't necessarily want to exclude those practitioners who aren't doing large animal practice, that they're doing mixed animal practice or small animal practice, but working in those rural communities. So I don't know if we necessarily want to weigh an applicant, I don't know if the committee is interested in weighing an applicant heavier if they're doing livestock practice or large animal practice.
No, I guess the reason I ask is, and I'm not picking on any community, and maybe this is unique, so it's not that relevant, but Amarillo is split roughly half Potter County, half Kendall County. Both are over 100,000 people now, but if both are under 150,000, if the population threshold does change, then conceivably you could have someone who's doing small animal exclusive in southwest Amarillo, the wealthier part of town, exclusively be eligible for that criteria. So is that, I'm not trying to exclude them either, but is there an evaluation criteria that maybe that doesn't align with the intent of the program?
Right, way heavier if they're going to be working in a county that has a greater need.
Well, then we've got to define counties with need,
And there are portions of that county that are in need.
Oh, yeah, very much so. So I'm not trying to exclude, there was a general question about it.
But wouldn't this committee be able to catch that with our discernment?
Yeah, I guess we just need to make sure that we're doing it against some.
Yes, so you're saying if everything about these two applicants are equal, except one is, working in wealthy part of the city, small animal practice, somebody else is working in food industry or something like that, and we really want to give it to the applicant working with large animals, does the committee have discretion to choose one applicant over another, or how do we weigh that? Is that sort of the idea that's being thrown out?
It is, and it's more just a question at this stage.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to exclude people. I'm just, thinking about aligning the eligibility with the intent of the Act. And maybe it's too much.
I don't know. I will tell you, it's very hard to, when you're interviewing someone or evaluating someone, it's hard to discern those kinds of things if you don't know the area. Specifically, because I've gotten into that some with interviews. I feel like we'll be sitting in an interview and they'll be talking about, and they're like, someone says, oh yeah, I practiced in, or I worked in Saginaw, which in the 90s was rural, and somebody's interviewing and says, where is Saginaw? Oh, it's outside of the Metroplex, and that's where the High School Radio Association is, and that's where, and it sounds really great, but if you know it, they're also a 6-day school that just won state, and it's a very, affluent area. So it's hard I have found it hard when evaluating applicants to discern, okay, is this really a rural area?
Right, without knowing it. And
without actually knowing it. I had a kid that worked in Georgetown, and I know Georgetown to not be rural, you know what I mean? But could he have been at a practice that was rural? Probably so. I don't know. So it's hard to pick those out when you don't know the area.
Is there an opportunity for evaluation matrix of other relevant items that the committee could consider?
Yes, there absolutely is.
And defining what those other relevant items are to get to what Stephen said.
Oh, I see. To leave it open-ended. The problem is, so part of the purpose of the administrative rulemaking is to let the public know the guidance that they need to follow in order to participate in the program. So it's important to articulate to the extent we can the eligibility criteria that the committee is going to consider. So it would be inappropriate for the committee to consider criteria that isn't included in the rule. Now, how open-ended you want, it needs to be open. It can be open-ended enough so as long as it puts the public on notice that the criteria that their applications will be evaluated on.
So if we wanted to use the type of practice as an evaluation criteria, even if we wanted to use it a very small weight, it still needs to be listed.
What if instead of, I'm just going to throw this out there, what if instead of type of practice, what about their intent as a practitioner? What is their goal that they're trying to accomplish? And that does allow us to look at a lot of different perspectives and metrics.
Right.
Based on their, because every story will be a little different.
Right.
And that will still, I think that might get captured with the personal statement too.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think you want to get into a situation where you're penalizing somebody for going to work in an urban ER situation because they have the loans, but really that's, they've all watched the Netflix shows where they want to move to the small town and be the veterinarian and do that. We don't want to punish those people that may have had to make those choices after graduation.
Right.
Can intent find its way into the personal statement?
I would like to know what their intent is, what their goals are. That would allow us to be able to discern between the two. Okay, this one here's going here because their husband or spouse got a job there as well and I need a job, or no, I'm going here to establish a mixed animal practice because I have a passion for mohair and I want to grow the sheep industry.
Well,
two different intents there.
Right, and the other thing to keep in mind is this program is targeted at vet students and recent graduates. So these are people at the beginning of their career. So I think it is appropriate for a reasonable criteria for the committee to ask what their veterinary career goals are. And so maybe we can even specify that as a separate personal statement about, you know, veterinary practice career goals or something along those lines. Or we can encompass that with the evaluation criteria of the personal statement.
Well, if you said for the personal statement, sort of a personal statement including her or his interest in the rural veterinary incentive program, so that specifically what has attracted them to that program might accomplish what Stephen is saying as one alternative. Rather than saying rural practice, you could say this program, and then that might help us understand why they are choosing that.
Can you add a letter of intent? Just
Yeah, so, I mean, something to indicate that they would be expected to be evaluated, or that the committee is going to evaluate them not only on what they've done, but what they plan to do, sort of their, and it could be, I mean, some of it will be just goal-oriented, but if they have a vision for themselves as working in a rural community, I think that would be important for the committee to know when choosing an applicant.
Be a big one for me. Are you here just to get the money and go home, or what's your career path look like? I think you can discern a lot there to have to write what their intention and goals are.
So personal statement regarding
Intent and goals. Does that open us up for any unnecessary complications?
No, we can also restrict the length of these personal statements. And I would highly recommend
An outline bullet point? That'd be great. 25 words or less.
What's the Twitter limit? Yeah.
250 characters?
Yeah. And this is, I mean, feel free to brainstorm too. This is not, none of the thoughts have to be completely articulated where they have to be a separate evaluation.
I don't see any other need. I think this list is pretty inclusive.
When you put the instructions to demonstrate financial need, can that be as simple as qualified federal financial needs and borrow at least half of 1 year?
Yes, it can. That could be the extent of your evaluation of that. That person appears to be in financial.
0 or 1.
Mm-hmm.
Eligible and be evaluated.
Correct.
Well, does the loan amount or debt amount weigh in there? I mean, if we're considering, we got X amount of dollars to divvy out, and we're gonna keep, looking at applicants till we run out of that money. But if they owe $1 or $100,000, don't we need to know that? Do they disclose that?
I think we do, but I wouldn't want that to give weight to whether somebody gets the award or not. I would want to know what that student did to incur that debt and what they didn't do that allowed them to incur that debt. I think that's critical to know. Were they good stewards of their opportunities, or did they just borrow money and go backpack Europe?
How do we capture that then?
That's in their personal statement.
Yeah.
Their CV and where they spent their time.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's two, I think there's, so the way I've structured this rule is basically to have a two-step process. One is that you rank an applicant based on criteria. Second is once you select the applicant, then you decide what they get out of the program. Do they have a commitment for multiple years? Do they have a commitment for a single year? criteria and what is the specific dollar amount that that particular participant will receive. So that's sort of, you evaluate, rank the applicants first, and if applicant 1 only requires $15,000 to wipe free their debts, then maybe that's all that you award to the first applicant, and then you move down the list. So that's what these rules are contemplating right now.
For existing students, that would then, as a scholarship, help preclude them taking on future.
Yes, it would. But we will also have the information about their projected tuition and fees for for their remaining education.
Would we allow someone to get their tuition and fees paid and money toward the loan that they already had? Does that make sense? Is that double dipping? They have a student loan already.
Well, they have to have a student loan to be a participant in the program.
Right.
But if they, took out a loan the first year, I mean, it envisions the student who had no idea what form of practice they wanted to do when they entered veterinary school, took out a loan, then realized, I really do want to focus the rest of my education with this goal in mind of working in a rural community in Texas.
Or maybe they don't find out about it till their 3rd year.
Yeah.
I would think they would qualify for both.
Mm-hmm.
Still debt.
Good. More comment on this section. We probably should move on. We'll get
I need to read the
Okay.
amendment. Make sure we're okay. So what we're going to do is under number 1 will stay the same, a personal statement indicating a background and interest in rural veterinary practice. We'll add a number 2, a personal statement of future intent and goals in veterinary medical practice. Does that capture what everybody was talking about the future planning?
Yes.
Then we'll add as number 3, a curriculum vitae or resume.
Evaluation thereof, right?
Yes, these are just eligibility criteria.
On the evaluation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then so yes, this is the how we weigh the applicants. So you would review their resume and give it a particular weight just based on its strengths.
The CV, the resume is not a criteria, but it's the product that's developed.
Right. So what they put on their resume is going to be the weight that you give it, I guess. Not the fact that they submitted one.
So we wouldn't have to actually add that as a number, I guess is what.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Because
You're right. We'll ask for one in the application, and that explains all the others. Good point. Let's remove that. So we'll remove that as number. So right now we have number 1, personal statement indicating background interest. The number 2 personal statement is about future goals. We will not include a request for a resume. So we'll renumber active veterinary practice to number 3. Number 3 will be renumbered to number 4. Number 4 will be renumbered to number 5. Number 5 will be renumbered to number 6. We will strike current number 6, coursework related to rural veterinary medicine, and we'll strike number 7, involvement in educational or personal activities of a rural nature. Financial need stays in, and then we'll add 2 more. If the applicant is a student at the time of application, whether they are in good standing or whether they are a student in good standing.
Good academic
standing.
Good academic standing. And then after that, an additional one, if the applicant is a licensed veterinarian at the time of application, whether they are licensed in good standing.
Do we put on there the 3 letters of recommendation, or that's just part of the application?
Oh, good point. I had missed that. I think we can just put letters of recommendation.
And that way, on the application, you could...
We could specify, if we say, oh, man, we had a hard time going through all 3 this year, let's drop it down to 2, or we didn't get a good picture with 3. So letters of recommendation will be another addition. No, this would be sort of a separate evaluation criteria. We need to know that they will have to go seek out these letters of recommendation. So the CV and resume is just the form that we get the information. Letters of recommendation sort of involves an additional step.
Okay.
Subsection B, selection committee for each application. 1, after the deadline for application, the presiding officer will select at least 3 committee members to serve as a selection committee. 2, the selection committee will individually score each eligible application using the scoring rubric published with the application. 3, the average score of the selection committee will be the applicant's final score. 4, applicants will be ranked based on their final scores.
Okay, I think we should. So this was to eliminate the need for all 9 committee members to have to evaluate every eligible application. And so Dr. Schwartz, as committee chair or presiding officer of the committee, would go to each of the individual committee members, ask about their availability or their bandwidth to actually do the evaluation. So we have it as him selecting, but I think the intent would be that he would be able to take volunteers, and after the volunteer spots are filled, appoint a selection committee. And I also, 3 is included, but that number can also change if you feel like it needs to be a greater number than 3. 3 seemed like a good minimum number, though.
And I'll accept bribes to get on the team or stay off.
Do we have any concerns with, like, a recusal process within the selection committee?
So that was another thing I was thinking about. We could also sanitize the applicants' names before it goes to the selection committee. That way, they don't feel like you would be too partial to a particular applicant that you might have a background in, or if some familiarity with. I can include that as a rule if the committee would prefer.
Is that enough?
I was thinking a quorum of this committee.
So we always have 9 members, so it would be 5.
We can always change it. I think as we get this thing started in the initial phase, and we're getting our legs underneath this, I think more input's probably warranted.
There's also a final selection after this specific.
Oh, there is. Okay.
Yeah, let's jump ahead to C and D. Or actually, C is the important one. And then we can jump back to B to see if we need to.
C, final selection for each application round. The committee will select participants from the ranked applicants. The number of participants selected and loan repayment assistance offered is contingent on available funding for each application round. Available funds will be distributed on a priority basis based on ranking.
So the selection committee would basically be responsible for scoring. Those scores would end up with a rank, and then the committee as a whole could then decide who to award or who becomes a participant in the program. Now, we can also put a limit on the final selection to a quorum of the committee or something like that, if we think there might be a challenge in gathering everybody together to make their final selections. We don't have to gather in an open meeting like today, because this is all something that you can do without open meeting. We're not making rules or policies that affect the public. These are just evaluation of the individual applicants. So it could be done by email or virtually or something.
So in
So
C.
Sorry. So the selection committee ranks them.
Mm-hmm.
And
scores them.
Scores them.
Yeah, that's the important. So that's probably going to be the most time-consuming task of choosing applicants, is actually scoring their applications. The committee as a whole who makes their selection will still get to see the application. It's not just a number, but they will be ranked, and that's sort of the number of deciding who gets awards and who doesn't get an award.
Who ranks them?
They'd be ranked off their scores. So it'd probably be the commission would come in with a list of the ranked applicants afterwards to provide to the committee.
Then C, the committee there is the whole committee, right? And
Yes,
not the selection committee.
correct.
Okay.
At least that is the intent, is that the final selection would be
What?
put on the entire committee. And maybe calling it a selection committee is maybe a misnomer. Evaluation committee. We could change that. That way it sounds a little bit, more.
Not selecting, they're just ranking.
Right.
So thoughts on 3 versus 5? Everybody has enough to do, so.
Well, the more people you get, the less each person has to do. You know what I mean?
Well, so I think part of the other reason for having multiple applicants is we want an average score. So each of the evaluation committee would have to score each application.
The average would be taken to rank.
Well, what if you got a quorum together and then each application had 3 evaluators?
Well, it'd be inconsistent. We've got 9 committee members, so if we have 3 separate groups that rank things differently. The reason why to do it would be fairness and consistency with the final score. So the same person basically is evaluating every application.
For consistency, and that makes sense, because you and I are going to evaluate them differently.
Right.
They may get a higher score based on whether they got me or they got you.
Right. I'm trying to think of because if you have a large number of applicants,
and this is
other situations where I've evaluated applications blindly, that's kind of how if they do it. They'll get, like, application 1 may have U3, and application 2 may have U3, and application 3 may have, just to not have each person evaluating 500 applications. But I don't know that there's going to be that many.
Yeah, this is the big unknown with our program, is how many applications will we get. Okay, just to give you some numbers, and maybe Dr. Lackey can help. I don't know if we know the specific Texas numbers. So for the federal program, which covers the entire United States, there are usually about 170 applications for that program and 60 to 70 selected. So if that's the entire United States, I don't think we're looking at 500 applications for Texas. But we might be looking at 50, 60 applications. A lot. Which still is a lot if you're evaluating their resume. So that's a great unknown.
Mm-hmm.
So, to Courtney's point, if there were 50 or 60, that's still a lot for 3 people to evaluate everyone.
Mm-hmm.
If you assigned the volunteers, right? Everyone gets evaluated by 3 of the committee, not necessarily the same 3, but that's the reason we have 3, is to get an average.
Okay.
If every person on the committee was the same, you'd only need one person to evaluate each one.
Right.
So I don't have a problem with different people evaluating different applicants, as long as you have enough that you're happy that if someone's a dove over here and someone's a hawk over here, that on average, the average score is fair across the candidate.
And Courtney, you swayed me because that's why we have a rubric. It's not like we're
Yeah.
making our own evaluations, we have the rubric to follow. So I'm agree, I like that idea.
Okay, so do we need to okay, so,
You just don't want to limit it to the same three people.
Right.
I think having three of the committee members evaluate each application is maybe a good statement, but you don't want the same three to evaluate every single application. And here's another thing is you can take off their name, but when they go to their personal statement and they start talking about what clinics they worked at,
yeah.
I may say, well, I got a conflict of interest. I need to remove myself, get another evaluator.
Okay, that's a
Good point.
good point.
Does say at least 3, so it could be the entire.
What if we had the presiding officer will assign 3 committee members to evaluate an application?
I like it.
Each application.
Yeah.
Not each application, because it may be three different.
Each applicant should be evaluated by three.
By
committee
three
members.
people, not
Right.
necessarily the same three.
Right.
To evaluate each application. I guess I can still say select. Select still works. So after the deadline for applications, the presiding officer will select at least 3 committee members to evaluate each application.
That gets it, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Gets it.
And then,
The evaluators.
the evaluators, yeah, instead of evaluation committee. And then we can actually change the first part of B, instead of selection committee for each application, the evaluation of applications for each application round.
Sounds good.
Okay.
And then on 3, it would be the average score of the evaluations will be the applicant's final score.
And applicants will be ranked on their final scores. So okay, I think that handles, the evaluation of the applications then. Okay, so B will read, evaluation of applications for each application round. 1, after the deadline for applications, the presiding officer will select at least 3 committee members to evaluate each application. The evaluators will individually score each eligible application using the scoring rubric published with the application. Number 3, the average score of the evaluations will be the applicant's final score, and 4, applicant will be ranked based on their final scores.
I like it.
Good.
Good. Okay, so C, final selection. So we read this one already. Is there any other edits or modifications that the committee would like to make to this section?
The standard loan repayment assistance or payment of tuition fees.
Oh, yes.
I think we may have talked about this last time, but I just can't remember. Let's say you have $100,000 and you have 10 people, you're 10 people at the top. The first one needs 50, the second one needs 50, whatever. If you get to where the first couple need $80,000 and you have 20,000 left, and the next one needs 50,000, can that person get the 20 even though it's not a total loan repayment?
Yes.
They can?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we actually have another section further on about the amount of assistance. 42.21, amount of loan repayment assistance. So it also gives the committee a little bit of flexibility on the amount they decide to award. So there's no requirements to have to max out the award for everybody, or max out and then have nothing left for anybody else. You can spread it out. Or like you said, just do a partial. That's completely allowed.
Okay.
When we say we select a veterinary student and we're paying their tuition and fees, do we want them, do we just do that for the rest of their education?
I think we would designate a dollar amount.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you would designate a dollar amount. So you may not be able to, you'd probably guess the average tuition and fees. I don't know how far ahead the universities have to publish their current tuition and fees.
I think our regents set them for a 2-year period typically.
Okay. That would be the only challenge, but that's something that we can also work out with the Higher Education Coordinating Board when it actually comes to doing the financial document.
If you had an amount, then if the tuition fees go up 2% or whatever, then so be it, right? You've still got an amount.
Yeah, and I think in the rule that discusses the amount, I sort of have a placeholder for a maximum amount of award, so that might even just answer our question there. If the tuition and fees exceed $45,000 or whatever the set maximum is, we've sort of set the ceiling.
Would you just read number 3 again there, the amended version? Where it starts at the average score.
The average score of the evaluations will be...
I heard the recommendation evaluators when it was recommended. And there's a different, it makes more sense if you say the average score of
the evaluators,
I think, rather than the evaluations.
The average score of the evaluators, well, that makes sense, because that's the score of the evaluators, will be the applicant's final score. Okay, and then C, we added the number of participants selected and loan repayment assistance or payment of tuition and fees offered is contingent on available funding for each application round. Okay, let's move on to, unless there's anything else, we'll move on to D.
D, following final selection, the commission will, 1, notify the participants selected by the committee, 2, provide information to the participants on the conditions of loan repayment assistance and additional steps the participant must take to receive loan repayment assistance, and 3, inform the participant of any deadlines to complete the additional steps.
So we'll add or payment of tuition and fees to each of those instances. And so the purpose of this would be then to take the participant through the next steps required to enter all the financial agreements with the Higher Education Board or the university systems. So that's something that the commission could help facilitate, and it wouldn't necessarily be a responsibility of the committee. Any comments on this one? Okay.
E, if a participant voluntarily withdraws their application after final selection or fails to complete the requirements to participate in the program by a specified deadline, the committee shall consider the participant's application denied for the application round, and that participant will no longer be eligible for loan repayment assistance during the application round.
I think we can change will no longer be eligible for loan payment assistance to no longer be eligible to participate in the program during that application round.
Agreed. Good.
Any comments or, all right, we'll move on.
42.15, denial of an application. As part of its administration, the Commission may reject an application if, 1, the application is received after the established deadline, 2, the application is incomplete or missing required information, or 3, the applicant does not meet the eligibility criteria.
Isn't 2 somewhat redundant? And why don't we just say the application is incomplete and then
Leave it at that.
leave it at that?
Yeah, that's fine. So we'll remove or missing required information.
Right.
Okay.
B, applications rejected by the Commission are considered denied by the committee. C, applicants may voluntarily withdraw their application after submission. If withdrawn, the application is considered denied by the committee. And D, denial of an application during an application round does not prevent the applicant from submitting an application in a future application round.
There's nothing, we'll move on. Okay, so this next rule addresses the rural community sponsors situation.
Rural community sponsors, 42.17. A rural community sponsor is 1, a community or political subdivision or group of such entities located in a rural county, or 2, a nonprofit entity governed by council members, commissioners, or a board of trustees that A, is responsible to and serves a community located in a rural county, and B, is legally authorized to raise funds or accept grants or financial gifts. Should I keep going?
Yeah.
B, to qualify to participate in the program, the rural community sponsor must, 1, notify the executive director of the commission in writing of its desire to participate in the program, 2, agree to provide an amount of not less than the tuition and fees required for a full academic year for a student enrolled in the College of Veterinary Medicine in exchange for the eligible participants' agreement to practice veterinary medicine in the sponsor's rural county for 1 year. 3, have selected a participant who is eligible to participate under the program. And 4, provide information requested by the Commission to determine the rural community sponsor eligibility under the program. C, the agreement between the rural community sponsor and the selected participant must include, but is not limited to, the following provisions. 1, the rural community sponsor will provide financial support to the participant in an amount not less than the tuition and fees required for a full academic year of study for a student enrolled in the College of Veterinary Medicine in exchange for the participant practicing veterinary medicine in the rural community for 1 calendar year. And 2, the participant sets their charges at the prevailing rate for the area.
Does anybody have any comments, concerns about this section?
Given that both academic institutions in our state are now schools of veterinary medicine, why don't we include that nomenclature? I'll, let Guy speak up about that as well, but that's what we're all using now in the state of Texas, is School of Veterinary Medicine.
Oh, school instead of college?
Yeah.
The only reason I included college is because that's what the statute has. But certainly we don't have to follow the exact rule, or we don't have to follow the same language as the statute. So I know we have College of Veterinary Medicine elsewhere. Do we want it consistently change everywhere to School of Veterinary Medicine?
What it is, so let's go.
Okay.
I think it would help too if we put A instead of D. Would that help? Because what if they're going to a school outside of Texas?
Rolled in a school, okay, of veterinary medicine. So a school rolled in a school. So B2, there'll be a change, a student enrolled in a school of veterinary medicine. And then C1 will change, enrolled in a school of veterinary medicine. And we might have to do a quick look through the rest of the rules to see, does it stand out for you anywhere else by chance?
Yes, from time to time, and obviously.
Probably just need to word search.
Yeah.
We'll just do a word search before we got
And it's
get somebody on that.
all giddy about it, too.
One, it does say an accredited college of veterinary medicine.
Where is that one at?
It's 42.9 eligibility.
I think it's semantics, but for the sake of our document being consistent, we should.
Yeah,
Yeah, change it all.
let's change that to school as well.
Yep.
It's appropriate for Texas.
Believe it or not, there's only 3.
Very good. All right.
Is the role of a rural sponsor primarily to identify students and pay them grant scholarship funds, or is it for the wider program that someone who's graduated within 4 years can apply, and there's a sponsor that wants to support?
There's a little bit of ambiguity in the statute about what the statute intended. I think one reading of it is that the rural sponsor has a participant that they want to participate in the program, and they want to be able to funnel their money directly to that student. I think there's an equally valid interpretation that the committee would help assist the rural community sponsor in finding a suitable applicant. And I think we could probably address that if we do. So having the rural community sponsor notify Dr. Schwartz of their intent to do this would help. He could then spread the word to the rest of the committee that, hey, I've got this person who wants to do this. However, they don't have a participant selected. They've asked for the committee to help us select one. Then we could reconvene as a committee and decide what to do from there.
But also, too, the rural community sponsor could be an eligible sponsor, could identify an eligible participant outside of formal application, align it, and so they would be able to enter in an agreement through the coordinating board, really separate from our...
They wouldn't even have to involve the coordinating board. I mean...
Well, they meant to deposit the money in the account for this.
Right.
For the
So in order to deposit the money into the account, the committee would have to approve them. So in order to take advantage of the program, and the only real advantage that the rural community sponsor would have in the program is the ability to deposit the money into the account and then allow somebody else to distribute the money.
But for us, it becomes, if they're eligible, as a sponsor, the applicant's eligible, and they've basically got into an agreement. Our job is really almost rubber stamping that, is that?
Yeah, to basically to screen them for eligibility into the program. And that's how the rules are crafted at the moment.
But the commission determines eligibility, we're just evaluating.
Correct.
So the commission the committee is separate from that. It's the commission then.
Right. So for the rule sponsor, really the only restriction to participation is the eligibility. There is no evaluation. Okay, this one it has a lot in it. A lot of this is from requirements of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board to kind of keep their requirements for particular loans. And a lot of them are very reasonable requirements once we go through them. So, Jabbar, go ahead.
Eligible lender and eligible education loan, section 42.9A. The board retains the right to determine the eligibility of educational loan providers to which payments may be made. An eligible lender or holder shall, in general, make or hold education loans made to individuals for purposes of undergraduate or veterinary medical education and shall not be any private individual. An eligible lender or holder may be, but is not limited to, a bank, savings and loan association, credit union, institution of higher education, secondary market, governmental agency, or private foundation. B, to be eligible for repayment, an education loan must, 1, be evidenced by a promissory note for loans to pay for the cost of attendance for veterinary medical education. 2, not have been made to cover costs incurred after completion of veterinary school. 3, not be in default at the time of the application. 4, not have an existing obligation to provide service for loan forgiveness through another program. 5, not be subject to repayment through another educational loan repayment or loan forgiveness program or repayment assistance provided by the applicant's employer while the applicant is participating in the program. 6, if the loan was consolidated with other loans, the applicant must provide documentation of the portion of the consolidated debt that was originated to pay for the cost of attendance for the applicant's veterinary medical education. And 7, not be an education loan made to oneself from one's own insurance policy or pension plan, or from the insurance policy or pension plan of a spouse or other relative.
Any questions? Okay, I think we move on.
40.
So this one, I think we'll have the automatic change of amount of loan repayment assistance or payment of tuition and fees. Let's get to the text.
42.21, amount of loan repayment assistance or payment of tuition and fees. A, the committee will determine the total obligated service periods for each participant with a minimum of 1 obligated service period and maximum of 4 obligated service periods. B, for each obligated service period, the participant may receive repayment assistance of up to $45,000 of loan repayment assistance or the total amount of the participant's qualifying loans, whichever is less. C, loan repayment assistance is contingent on available funding. If at any time the amount of money available for loan repayment assistance is insufficient to award the maximum annual award amount to all participants, the committee may reduce award amounts to assist a greater number of participants.
Okay, so there are a couple decisions that the committee will need to make is, do we want 4 maximum obligated service periods, or do we want to increase the threshold? Minimum of 1 is sort of required for the 1-to-1 scenario that of the statute, but the high end, the maximum, is open-ended. And then if we want to set a maximum amount of assistance that the program would provide. So this number, $45,000, I think the last discussion the committee had, there was talk about 180 is what's required to really tie a person to a community and make a significant difference in their career. If they received $180,000 in assistance, that would really allow them to stay in that community longer. So 45,000 is basically 180 divided by 4.
I think that number came from the average cost of veterinary school in Texas is where that 180 came from. So that would pretty much
188 was what the
wipe out their debt.
That would wipe out their debt and take care of most of their tuition and fees if they were to receive the scholarship.
Correct. I'm comfortable with that. That's what we discussed last.
And again, that's the maximum. If the committee decided to award less than the maximum, that's also perfectly permitted. Does the committee want to leave a maximum of 4 obligated service periods?
The only time I can see that being an issue is, I don't know about you guys, but I know that A&M offers the MBA program during your vet school, right? Do they still do that?
Yep.
Okay, and so I know there are some successful rural veterinarians that got their MBA while they were in vet school. And I don't know, obviously, maybe that year is not covered, but they're not going to graduate but for 5 years, right, Dr. August?
That's right. It's a very, very small number.
Oh, really?
A very, very small number.
That's the only instance I can see it being an issue, but
One thing here, they have to have already incurred half a year of debt in vet school. So they're already 6 months into, at least, into vet school before they can apply. 4 would capture that sufficiently there.
yeah.
I mean, it's almost sort of one or fewer per year.
Really?
Yes, really, yeah.
Must have been popular. I think it rolled out like when I first got into school, so.
I don't think I'd alter things just for that very, very rare occasion. I'm sure hopefully the committee could look at extenuating circumstances.
Well, I mean, here's part of the thing. If we have it in the rule as a maximum, that's the rule you have to abide by. So if you've got an applicant that had somehow 5 years of vet school and was ready to commit 5 years in a rural practice, we'd still only be able to, you would only be able to award the maximum of 4. But I think the 5 years sounds like the rare exception.
Well, what if somebody does an internship or a residency?
So.
I mean, then now we are looking at a maximum higher than 4, and there may be that situation where that's the case.
Do they pay tuition and fees during that residency?
No, most.
Okay. So that might address that. So it's
Most
year for
loans
year
are
still.
deferred.
Are they still deferred?
They were when I was in school. They defer your loans.
Depends on if you're in an academic internship or a private practice. I don't think you can defer in private practice internship.
So potentially $180,000, that's 4-year cost of attendance at a Texas institution, or the median debt nationwide now. So that's substantial. And so if there's an opportunity to say, well, you know, to wipe out that amount of debt is worth 5 years to someone,
Yeah.
I think a longer period would be better. It's still lump sum, right?
Yeah, but it's still that 1-for-1. So that particular applicant would have to have a 5th year of loans or 5th year of academic study to obligate them to a 5th year.
Oh, it's 1-to-1, okay. I see what you're saying. So, then that is not relevant. But it's still here, it's still lump sum. So if they got the maximum amount per year for 4 years, 4 years in return, they'd get 180 up front.
They could.
What? And then they've got 4 years of a conditional loan. Okay.
I like it.
Okay, so the only other changes to this provision will be on B, for each obligated service period the participant may receive, I'm going to add the word loan, repayment assistance, or payment of tuition and fees of up to $45,000. Let's just eliminate those, let's cross out of loan repayment assistance, of up to $45,000, or the total amount of the participants' qualifying loans or tuition and fees.
You would have to do the same in C, add tuition and fees at loan or payment assistance. I don't think we have to do that every time in the document anymore. We know that.
Yeah. I'm just making sure she gets it. Okay. So there we go. So C, we've also updated to add or payment of tuition and fees. Okay, so
The 1, this is just, the 1 should be spelled out.
Okay, so instead of the numeral 1, we'll spell O-N-E, 1 obligated service period, and a maximum of F-O-U-R, obligated service periods. And then we can remove the brackets on $45,000, because that's the number the committee's decided on.
.23 conditions of loan repayment assistance or payment of tuition and fees. A, to receive loan repayment assistance or payment of tuition and fees, a participant must execute an agreement in accordance with Texas Education Code, Subchapter G, Section 56.106, that includes the following terms. 1, the participant agrees to provide veterinary medical services in a rural county for 1 calendar year for each academic year for which the recipient receives financial support under the program. And 2, the participant signs a promissory note acknowledging the conditional nature of the financial support received under the program and promises to repay the amount of the financial support, any applicable interest, and reasonable collection costs if the recipient does not satisfy the conditions of the agreement. B, the participant must comply with applicable federal law, state law, program requirements, and agreement requirements, including but not limited to the following. 1, provide full-time veterinary medical service in the qualifying county or counties for the duration of the obligated service period. 2, cooperate with the commission and the committee if information relevant to the program is requested. 3, provide a 30-day written notice to the commission, committee, and board, and
eliminate the
and promissory note holder of any change in address, lender, or other relevant contact information during the agreement term. And 4, submit periodic statements to the commission certifying compliance with the program and contractual requirements in accordance with reporting timelines provided in the agreement. C, all obligations under the program are satisfied when any of the following conditions are met. 1, all terms of the agreement are met. 2, the participant who entered into the agreement due to death or disability is unable to meet the requirements of the program. Or 3, the participant who entered into the agreement has no remaining eligible education loan balance to repay. D, in the event of the participant's death during an obligated service period, the loan repayment will be prorated based on the percentage of full-time veterinary medical service provided by the participant during the obligated service periods. E, in the event of the participant's disability, the loan repayment will be prorated based on the percentage of full-time veterinary medical service provided by the participant during the obligated service period or periods.
I don't remember where we defined in this, through earlier reading, full-time as 32 hours. Is it?
Yes.
Is it?
An average of 32
we don't
hours.
Need to we don't need to say that again here?
No.
No.
In C2, the conditions of the loan are considered met if someone's died or meets the definitions of disability, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then what's the point of
the prorated? Yeah, I was.
Because you're saying they're met in C2.
Well, they're met as in they don't have to continue with the obligation anymore, but they received a lump sum up front, so they're not. You're right.
More. Would that then fall to their spouse to pay off the remaining debt that wasn't served?
Not necessarily.
That's the way it reads, is that it's prorated.
So
C2 says it's met.
Yeah.
And D conflicts with that.
Yeah, I think we either eliminate 2 or we eliminate D and E. D or E.
I'd eliminate D and E. Yeah.
I think it's within the discretion of the committee. So we'll just eliminate those 2.
I don't know if it's addressed or not, but last time we talked about if someone commits to this and they work 3 of the 4 years or something like that, does all that money need to come back or a prorated amount?
Yeah.
Prorated. Forgiven per annual commitment accomplishment.
Okay.
But if they work, or you're saying if they work 11 months of one obligated period and then move away, unfortunately that means they owe back that entire obligated period, or the assistance they received in exchange for that obligated period. And that is going to be spelled out in more specifics with the promissory note and the financial agreement the participant signs with the university or preferably the board.
Well, I mean, it's no different, Dr. August, if I was to finish 3/4 of vet school, you wouldn't give me 3/4 of a degree. Maybe you would.
It depends what kind of veterinarian you are.
Even the lowest GPA is still called doctor.
That's right.
Conditional.
Oh, it's passing. I was gonna say D doesn't count on that. I'm gonna tell you a story real quick. I was testifying in front of the Senate committee, and I put mine, you sign up for your name, and I put Stephen Gola, DVM, and the senator goes, Dr. Dumb? DVM is D-U-M.
Well, on that, Britt Conklin had to get his transcripts from A&M before he came to work for us. And they sent it to him as Britt Conklin, D-U-M.
Okay, so we'll remove an and D3, and then we'll strike D and strike E completely.
One thing on C, under C, due to death or disability, should it be qualifying disability since our definition is qualifying disability?
Thank you, good catch, let's add that. I think our definition basically captures, yeah. All right.
42.25, disbursement of loan repayment assistance. A, the annual loan repayment amount may be dispersed in the form of a lump sum. 1, co-payable to the participant and the holders of the loan or loans, or 2, payable directly to the holder of the loan or loans on the participant's behalf. B, the board follows Internal Revenue Service requirements for reporting of loan repayment assistance to participant during each calendar year. C, to receive disbursements, a participant must comply with all agreement requirements, including required periodic reporting.
Okay, so I now realize we do need to add or to the participant's university, or we could say participant's School of Veterinary Medicine, is that?
It's in the statute.
It's in the
university.
Okay. We could probably say payable directly to the holders of the loans, no, or we can add or to the participant's university system.
Scholarship and fees.
If that bill passes, it changes the university system to school.
Well, yeah, the university system is technically a separate entity than the university. Statute says university system, so.
Yeah, so the financial distribution statute isn't set to change, and that one does say university system in it.
Is there any need to elaborate on periodic reporting, or is that articulated?
It all is going to depend on the source of the funding.
Okay.
So sometimes, yeah, so if we get appropriated money from the legislature, we may not have to report on it at all, but with the federal funds, we are required to do some reporting. The reason, so also the included periodic reporting is going to be elaborated in the particular promissory note and agreement that tells the participant how often they need to certify their employment, how often they need to certify that they are actually working in the rural community that they pledge to work in.
There is no requirement that the participant report back on an annual basis to the commission with regard to what she or he is actually doing to fulfill the spirit of the contract.
No, the note holder is the one that's going to be in charge of that.
I thought it did say earlier that they have to report back about what they're doing, right?
They need to cooperate to provide information, but in terms of...
There should be some kind of verification.
Right, there will be. That's part of...
To the coordinating board, or does that come to the commission?
That's going to go to the coordinating board.
How would we, as a committee, know that participants are fulfilling the spirit of the contract on for which we selected? How would we know as we look at across time?
We could get that information from the loan holder, so from the coordinating board or from the university, if that's ultimately who holds the loan. We can also mandate in the agreement that they send us the same periodic reporting that they would be sending to the loan holder.
So right now, 4223B4 says submit periodic statements to the commission certifying compliance with program and contractual requirements and according with reporting timelines provided.
Yeah, so that's going to be part of their contract.
That thing is coming.
Can you go to that last set of points that you had raised? So you have maybe dispersed in the form of a lump sum, and this may be the same in the statute, it shall be awarded as a lump sum. Are those essentially equivalent in the way they're written?
No. The shall is mandatory, may is discretionary. So we should mirror the...
Would it even be annual? Wouldn't it just be the loan repayment amount shall be dispersed in the form of a lump sum?
Well, the statute's awarded, huh?
We could do it as financial assistance. We use that term. The financial assistance sort of accompanies both loan repayment.
It's not an annual...
No, it's not. I think that this might have been just an artifact from a previous version. So what do we say, financial assistance? And remove...
Support from the account shall be awarded as a lump sum payable is what the statute...
Okay, so financial support.
You should just copy and paste that.
Or we say disbursement of the loan should be in accordance with 61 point... I mean, if the statute already gives us sufficient instructions, there's no need.
56106C.
56, 106.
C.
The only thing is that, yeah.
That way we don't have to look it up.
Okay. And then, okay, so we should, yeah, just eliminate it to, I'm even questioning whether or not we need this rule at all, since we already have a statute that governs it.
And we're not dispersing.
And we're not dispersing it. I mean, the board doesn't really need our assistance in figuring it out.
Not germane.
Let's just eliminate the rule and take it completely.
4225 struck.
Mm-hmm. That was the last of the proposed rule.
Wow. 19 minutes, that's fair.
Okay, so, yes.
If you have a vet student that applies in their first year for loan repayment, and they're awarded, then their fourth year rolls around and they decide to do an internship before they go to their rural practice, is that ixnayed, or is that allowed?
So, school, year off, back in school.
No, school, a year of extended education that does not require tuition and fees, rural practice. Is there, I mean, I don't know.
I don't think there's anywhere in there that says they can't do that.
No, I mean, they would definitely be allowed to be a participant, but you're saying, can we provide them another year of financial support for that?
No, I'm just wondering.
Give them a grace period.
Yes, is there a grace period?
Just starting practice.
Oh, I see.
Saying they're not going to be in rural, well, most of the time, they won't be in rural practice or in a rural county during their internship.
Right.
So are they allowed to go to an internship outside of a rural county before they start their?
I would say yes.
Yes.
And if they did an internship in a rural county in Texas, that would still qualify.
Right, and so I just don't know
whether they come back to the committee requesting that.
How does that work, and is that okay? If their internship is not in a rural county, does that mean they have to repay
No.
what they were awarded?
No, because they can still fulfill their commitment.
They just have to
Okay.
notify the,
They just have to notify?
Or let's take that one step further. Let's say, okay, they got this externship. It's not in Texas. It's out of state or it's in another country or something, but it's part of their education.
Right.
Do we let them take a break for it?
And then they decide to do a residency before
Yeah.
they go back home to the valley.
Right.
I don't know.
Sure. You don't want to penalize them. They're still on the hook for it. If they don't then participate, they owe the money.
So when do we decide they owe the money, right? Because now they went to a internship and then a residency, and then hopefully they go back to a rural community, but I know a lot of people that don't.
Right.
So when do you decide?
So we could work, I mean, the contract between, the repayment contract could be,
And so if you allow someone a grace period for an internship and a residency program, does someone else get a grace period to go to Australia and learn about sheep in a non-rural community for 4 years?
do we want to work in a rule about a grace period or some kind
It
of,
would be a case-by-case.
I don't know.
Saying any grace periods will be considered by the committee.
So
we can add a rule for that.
Because what if somebody what if their fourth year after graduation, they're driving home and they're in a bad car wreck and they're out for a year?
But they still want to, it's not a qualifying disability, they want to continue to work after they've recovered.
Right.
We'll just have to review it as a committee, case by case, but I think we need to have a
We have a rule. Okay, let's add a 42.25 back in.
That happened to one of my classmates. Put in the fourth year.
I think based on practical experience, this is going to be a very rare case as well, that somebody would want to do an internship and residency, and then after that head to a rural community. That would just be an unusual career pattern in my, very unusual.
maybe not an internship, though. I mean,
Not an internship.
but residency.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'd go back in under 42.23 where we struck out C and E before. This could become a D, right?
Yes, it could
And
be.
it could be something because it requires a year for a year. So if someone said, I'm going to take maternity leave for 4 months, then it would be hard for them to demonstrate full-time, 32 hours a week for a calendar year. So there needs to be that.
Yeah, let's add it let's add a new section D, and then it could be something along the lines of the committee may permit a participant, and so in the student loan world, they always use, deferment, grace period, things like that, forbearance under certain circumstances on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I think it needs to be really broad, right? So that the committee can evaluate it for any reason, maternity leave, internship, a disability, a short-term disability, or whatever.
Where do we say that when, have we set any limits on when they pay back? That when their service has to start by, or?
That's what, yeah.
We
Yeah,
don't really see-
no, we don't. And it's mostly because,
I'll do it next year. No, next year.
yeah, exactly.
So if you pay the tuition and fees, you meant to start within 6 months of graduation or?
Will that be included in the promissory note?
It will be included in the promissory note, but if we want the committee to retain some kind of discretion about when to allow a forbearance, we probably should specify that by rule. That way, it's not going to be contracted around.
We could put it to the next application period.
What if you just did, and we got to somewhere to start?
Mm-hmm.
Commitment should start 6 months upon graduation. All exceptions will be reviewed by the committee.
Or upon awardance?
No, because some of them are still in school. They're going to be awarded their
Oh,
second
yeah.
year.
I'm just wondering about the people that aren't students.
Then that would need to happen immediately.
We could have the first obligated period, or I can't remember what it's defined as, obligated service period.
And do their obligated service periods have to be consecutive?
Let's add that into the rule if they want them to be.
Good point.
Obligated service period must
I
be.
got another one. This is rare, but what if you have somebody in military service that's in the reserves and they're deployed? I mean, that's another scenario.
I think if our forbearance or whatever term we're gonna use is pretty broad, we just say,
And all exceptions would come to us.
yeah, if forbearance at any point during the obligatory period, is at the discretion of the committee maybe, or something to that effect?
We could say the committee retains discretion to grant forbearance. I'm not committed to the word forbearance, during a participant's obligated service period. For good cause. And obviously, so there is a peace officer loan repayment program that Higher Education Board does, and they actually specify about military service, pausing the sort of service period.
I think the easiest thing to do, if there's anything that comes up, it just comes to this committee and we decide. However you term that in there.
Right. And I think, I don't know if you need to put requirements for notification, like must be notified within 6 weeks of, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of that you don't know. If you're in a bad car wreck, you don't know you're going to be in a bad car wreck.
I suspect that it should come to the committee, as you say, and we don't know all of it, so it should be broad, but it's going to have to be within the contract with the coordinating board, because we don't want to look at something and say this is fine, and the coordinating board says that's not fine.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, we want, so basically if we do a rule related to this scenario, that gives the coordinating board sort of a limit of what they can consider a breach of contract and what they can't consider a breach of contract.
Or if they're requested to use your term, forbearance, that they would seek guidance from the committee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could include that as part of the...
Could add it to the 30-day written notice in 23B3. Just add it on.
Provide written notice of any circumstances that would prohibit them from fulfilling the obligations under the contract.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So add another 4. Provide notice of any circumstances that would prevent fulfillment of prevent participant from fulfilling the obligation service period.
Well,
fulfilling it within a certain time period. So they still plan to fulfill it?
Cause a delay in fulfilling them.
Yep. Exactly.
Delay, yeah. Do we still want to add about when the obligated service periods should start? Or are we going to do that based on the individual contract that we provide. So if there's an award to a student, we could say,
Yeah.
we could add that into the
As long as
contract.
That way, if we do want to allow a year for an internship, we can.
I mean, if they're giving us their career goals, they should. Loris, did you capture that last?
She's
The
all
last
over.
one, yes. Most.
The other stuff, no, that's okay.
I'm relying on your notes.
Okay. What did you get for the last one about the delay?
For the last one, I got, provide written notice that would cause a delay the fulfillment of the obligated service period. Is that close to what you got?
Provide. Say any cause of a delay and fulfillment of.
Provide written notice. Say that one more time.
For any cause in delay.
I know we're getting up to 2, but some of it would be them not just telling us there's a cause for delay, right? They're requesting it.
Yeah, you're right, not just a notice. Okay, so maybe notice
Written
is
request for an extension of the performance.
deferment, yeah. I was thinking of the student loans, they allow grace, deferment, forbearance.
Just they can provide a written request to extend the performance period.
Extend the performance period, the obligated service period
Yeah.
with good cause, or.
Or to delay or extend.
Forbearance would like shift it, whereas grace period would shift it. So if we want to move it, it would be a forbearance.
Oh, yeah, we could,
We're just going to let them not have to complete that. That would be great.
I wonder if we can include a forbearance as part of their individual contract, and then we don't have to have it as part of the rule. Because I think the higher education board, I mean, they do this all the time. They're used to, students not being able to meet those obligations. I mean, not everything goes as planned.
Well,
Stuff happens.
To Courtney's point, if they're planning to start their performance period or service period this July, but then they get an offer for a great internship that will help them become a better veterinarian, and so they request a forbearance for 12 months, I think is what you're...
Yeah.
Agreement requirements, including but not limited to. Oh, okay, so this is what we're going to include in. A provision regarding the terms of a forbearance. Hold on, I'm started thinking out loud. All requests to extend the obligation service period or to receive a forbearance will be made to the committee. And the committee has discretion whether or not to grant it. Committee retains discretion to grant extension or forbearance. Or we could just leave it in, the committee retains discretion to grant an extension of the obligated service period or forbearance of the obligated service period. And that way, when we put it in the contract, we can specify the means that they notify either the board or the committee of their request.
I don't think we mean extend it, as in make it longer, but we just.
Forbearance, yeah, so to Jabar's support, forbearance means it will be fulfilled at a later time.
Right.
It doesn't disappear for the same amount of time. Okay, so let's add number 5. The committee retains discretion to grant a forbearance for good cause.
So we're striking the "and" on 3.
Yeah, so strike the "and" on, yeah, you can add it.
And add it on 4.
Yeah.
And we're adding a 5.
And the 5 will be the, yes, 5 is the committee retains discretion to grant a forbearance for good cause. And that way it will become part of our contract, or the board's contract.
The committee retains discretion to grant forbearance for
Good cause. Okay, now we have completed, updated, proposed rules. Slide this over.
So we need to vote.
Well, you can ask if there's any motions.
public comment.
Oh,
Is there, well, we move in, Jeff. Do I hear a motion to propose the new Chapter 42 concerning Rural Veterinary Incentive Program located in Title IV of the Texas Administrative Code with changes as necessary to the proposed text? Do I hear a motion to that?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Second. Now, is there any discussion or public comment? Any discussion? All those in favor of this proposal, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Now, 9 is public comment, and I believe we didn't get any cards. Right. Then, the next agenda item, number 10, is to discuss future meetings. Agenda items, date, and other arrangements. So Jabbar laid out a schedule that we had hoped to hit, scheduled this next meeting. It needs to follow the public comment and address any public comment and then adopt, right? Is that right?
correct.
So what is the range then of that next meeting?
After April 10th.
After April 10th. And then it goes into effect 20 days After that, or after it gets in Texas
Yeah,
Registry?
if we submit it to the Secretary of State that day, it would be 20 days. Is there a specific time cutoff? 11:59.
11:59.
You said April 20th?
10th.
April 10th, sorry.
After April 10th, so.
Yeah.
The other way we could aim for that week, and then we could also do the doodle poll that Amanda sent out last time to make sure we have a sufficient quorum for whatever day that is selected.
Is that acceptable to do the doodle poll again?
It's the most efficient.
Rather than trying to commit right now.
And this is the week after the 10th, you said, possibly?
Yes.
Well, the week of the 10th or the week after?
The week, sometime after April 10th. So,
Tuesday, the 11th onward.
yes.
Okay.
We have an inspector work conference. We have an inspector work conference that week.
We could also choose a different location other than this one in order to hold
Well,
it.
it won't be held here, it's just that some of us
Yeah. Oh, okay.
will be tied up. We'll do the doodle poll. We need to know more precise times.
Luckily, this was the big work session.
Well, I'm thoroughly amazed and impressed and very thankful of the effort today. You guys are great, and I can't believe we hammered through this. Thank you, Janine, Jabbar, and all of you for spending your time and your expertise. So, there's no further business. We'll call this meeting adjourned at 2:05 p.m.